You're watching Noir Lane. I'm your host, David. Remember, every story hides a secret, and every shadow hides a clue. Tell us what part of the world you're watching from. Subscribe and hit the like button. Join us in the mystery, and let's dive into the story. Chapter 1. When a woman walks into Nero Wolfe's office, as if she has mislaid her invitation but not her right to be there. You can usually sort her into one of three bins: desperate, deluded, or dangerous. The trouble with Lila Hart was that she carried herself like a woman who had already sorted you. It was one of those winter afternoons that makes Manhattan look freshly scrubbed and slightly malicious. The sky was a flat slate lid, the air had teeth, and the street outside the brownstone on West 35th carried the usual soundtrack of taxis, footsteps, and impatience. Inside, the house ran on its regular rails. Fritz Brenner was in the kitchen conducting order with quiet authority. Theodore Horstman was upstairs with the orchids, or had recently finished, which in Wolfe's calendar is as fixed as sunrise. Wolfe himself was in his office, an enormous mass of composure behind his desk, reading as if the world had no claim on his attention unless he chose to grant it. I was at my desk, which is the outpost between Wolfe's comfort and everyone else's emergencies, and I was doing the kind of office work that keeps a detective's business respectable. You can call it paperwork. I call it camouflage. The doorbell rang. I looked up. Wolfe did not. I went to the front door, opened it, and found a woman standing on the stoop with the steadiness of someone who did not fear being refused. She was in her 30s, maybe a little past, wearing a dark coat that fit as if it had been measured for her and not for the season. Her hair was chestnut, glossy and restrained. Her face was handsome in a way that did not ask for compliments. Her eyes were the part that made my fingers itch. They were clear, direct, and hard enough to have seen consequences without flinching. "You are Archie Goodwin," she said. It was not a question, it was a placement. "That depends," I told her. "Who's collecting?" "Lila Hart." The name meant nothing to me, which never comforts me. People with names you recognize can still hurt you, but at least you know which direction they came from. "Well, Miss Hart," I said, "Mr. Wolfe sees clients by appointment." She stepped inside before I had decided whether to let her, and that, in Wolfe's house, is a form of rudeness that borders on sin. I closed the door and followed her down the hall. She walked as if she knew where she was going, not darting, not peering, not taking in the place like a tourist. Straight down the corridor, turned at the right point, and into the office doorway as if she had used it before. That set my nerves to attention. Wolfe looked up from his book, saw her, and let his eyelids droop slightly, which in his language can mean boredom, contempt, irritation, or all three at once. "Mr. Wolfe," she said. Wolfe did not answer. He simply stared at her, as if she were an object that had appeared where it did not belong. She did not take the red leather chair. That was her first insult. People sit because Wolfe's presence makes standing feel like a challenge. She remained upright in the center of the room, coat still buttoned, hands relaxed, posture easy. It was the posture of a woman who expects the room to adjust to her. Wolfe closed his book with care, set it down, and spoke in the voice he uses for intrusions. "You have entered my home without invitations." She glanced at me, then back to Wolfe. I was let in. Wolfe's eyes shifted to me. They were a shade colder. "I opened the door," I said. "I did not invite her. She invited herself." Wolfe grunted. "You will state your business." "My business," she said, "is your regret." If the temperature in that office dropped another degree, I could have sold ice by the spoonful. Wolfe's face did not change, but his mouth tightened at the corners. It was small, but it was there. Wolfe does not let people touch him with words, and she had reached for something under his skin. "You presume that I have regrets," Wolfe said. She smiled briefly. It did not reach her eyes. "Everyone has one they never admit." Wolfe's voice went colder. "You are mistaken." "No," she said quietly. "I am not." Wolfe sat straighter. When Wolfe becomes more exact, it is never a good sign for the other person. You will explain, he said. I can name the only thing you ever wish you could undo, she replied, and you will know it when you hear it. Wolf stared as if she had offered him a rotten fruit. You cannot. I can, she said, but not here. Wolf's nostrils flared. You have chosen here by entering. This house is part of it, she said, and her eyes moved once around the room, measuring it, taking in the door, the chairs, the desk, and the easy familiarity of our routine, as if she were comparing it to something she already knew. That word, house, landed wrong. Wolf's house is his fortress, his organism, his schedule made wood and stone. He does not share it willingly, and he certainly does not like it being included in anyone's mystery except his own. You are either a fool, Wolf said, or a criminal, or an instrument. She tilted her head slightly. You forgot, messenger. Wolf's eyes narrowed. From whom? From the past, she said. I felt my shoulders tighten. When a stranger brings the past into a room like that, it is never a souvenir. Wolf's tone hardened. I have no interest in messages from the past. You will, she said, still calm, because it is already in the house. Wolf looked at her for a long beat. Silence thickened between them. I could hear the office clock ticking, the faint background sound of the city outside, and a distant clink from the kitchen that meant Fritz was preparing something civilized. The brownstone's rhythms, as always, were steady and familiar. Wolf broke the silence with a decision I did not expect. Archie, he said. Yes. Pay her, Wolf said. I blinked. Pay her for what? For departure, Wolf said, immediate and permanent. He named a sum that would make most people smile. It was not a little sum. It was Wolf being generous in a way that meant he was not merely irritated. He was uncomfortable. Lila Hart glanced at him as if amused. You are scared enough to be extravagant. Wolf's eyes sharpened. I do not experience fear. She smiled again. That wrong smile. Then you experience something very similar and call it something else. Wolf's mouth compressed. You will take the money and leave. No, she said. Wolf's voice was flat. Declining that sum is irrational. My life is not what is at stake, she replied. Wolf's gaze hardened. Then who's yours, she said. I leaned slightly against my desk, because if I did not look casual, my nerves would show. Lady, if you came to sell Wolf his own misery, he's not a customer, he's a manufacturer. Her eyes flicked to me. You're the one who keeps him human. Barely, I said. Who sent you? No one sent me, she replied. I came because I'm tired of waiting. Waiting for what? I asked. For you to notice the past has been sitting in your parlor, she said. Wolf's eyes snapped toward the hall door, not because he believed the past was literally sitting on a sofa, but because he was mapping the house. Wolf's mind does that automatically when someone touches his sense of order. He looked at me. Archie, go to the front room. I went because Wolf's tone had moved from annoyance to command. The front room was as it should be, furniture arranged with solemn correctness, drapes properly hung. No packages, no strangers, no odd scents. I checked the parlor, the dining room, even the little area near the stairs where a person might stand and listen. The house felt normal, and that was the part that bothered me. Normal can be staged. I returned to the office. Lila Hart stood where she had been, and Wolf was watching her with the expression of a man deciding whether to crush an insect or dissect it. There's no one, I said. Her smile returned faintly. That's the point. Wolf's voice sharpened. You will state your purpose plainly, or you will depart with my associate escorting you. She studied Wolf's face for a moment, and something like sadness flickered across her expression, quick and controlled. Then it vanished. This house runs on a schedule, she said. Meals at fixed hours, orchid time. Beer, silence. Everyone who lives here knows the rhythms. If someone doesn't live here but knows them anyway, that is danger. My throat tightened. It was too accurate. You can learn a brownstone's layout from a street map. You learn its rhythms only by observing it, or by having once belonged to it. Wolf's eyes narrowed. You are suggesting someone knows my habits. I'm saying someone knows you, she replied. Not as the detective, as the man. Wolf's face was granite. I am not a subject for sentiment. No, she said. You're a subject for leverage. Wolf's voice went razor-thin. You imply I can be manipulated. I'm saying you can be provoked, she replied calmly. And someone wants to provoke you in your own house. I felt a cold pressure behind my ribs. Wolf was very still. When Wolf goes still like that, it means he is not merely listening. He is weighing. He spoke quietly. Archie, lock the front door and the side door. Instruct Fritz to admit no one. I nodded and moved because those were sensible steps, and also because moving let me pretend my hands were steady. At the front door, I slid the lock. At the side door, I did the same. In the kitchen, I told Fritz. Fritz listened, nodded once, and did not ask questions, which is one of the reasons civilization survives in that house. When I returned to the office, Lila Hart was already turning toward the door. Keep your money, she said. Keep your schedule, but don't trust it. Wolf's voice was cold. You presume to advise me. I presume you want to live, she replied. At the doorway, she turned back, and for a moment her eyes looked tired. The past is already in the house, she said, and someone has been living in it without living here. Then she left, walking down the hall with the same easy familiarity, and out the front door into the winter afternoon. I watched from the window as she went down the block without looking back. No car pulled up. No figure stepped out to meet her. She just walked. A dark coat moving through a grey city, and then she was swallowed by it. I went back to the office. Wolf sat behind his desk with his hands folded, eyes lowered as if reading something invisible on the blotter. Well, I said, that was a pleasant interruption. Wolf's voice was low. It was impertinent. And specific, I added. She thinks someone knows the house. Wolf's eyes lifted. She wants me to believe that. You don't, I said. Wolf's mouth tightened. I believe she intended consequence. I sat at my desk and reached for the phone, because that is what I do when the air feels wrong. Before I dialed, Fritz appeared in the doorway with a beer for Wolf, placed it with quiet competence, and withdrew. Wolf poured, took a slow swallow, and set the glass down with exaggerated care. Remain attentive, Wolf said. I remained attentive. That is easy when your mind keeps replaying a woman's wrong smile and the way she knew the house's rails. An hour later, the doorbell rang again. I looked at Wolf. Wolf looked at me. His eyes were cold now, not irritated. I went to the door, opened it a cautious crack, and found a uniformed policeman on the stoop. He was young, earnest, and trying to look official in the face of cold air. Archie Goodwin, he said. That depends. I replied by reflex. Who's collecting? Officer Malloy, he said, holding up his badge. I need to speak with Nero Wolf. That name stopped me. Malloy was one of Inspector Kramer's men. He did not come to deliver invitations. I led him to the office. Malloy stood just inside, hat in hand, eyes flicking around the room, as if the house itself made him cautious. Mr. Wolf, Malloy said, a woman named Lila Hart was found dead in an alley 3 blocks from here. Medical examiner estimates it happened within the last hour. My stomach went tight. Wolf's face did not change. Dead. Yes, sir, Malloy said. Inspector Kramer asked me to tell you. He also asked whether she was here today. Wolf's eyes shifted to me and then back. She was here. Malloy swallowed. Then we'll need statements, and we need to know if anyone else was in the house. No one, Wolf said. Malloy hesitated, then added, There's one more thing. The alley, there were no signs of a struggle. It was quick and clean. Like whoever did it knew exactly how much time he had. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Time, Malloy nodded, like he was keeping to a schedule. The room chilled again, I said quietly. That's what she talked about, the rhythms. Malloy looked confused, but Wolf was not. Wolf's gaze had shifted inward, and that was always dangerous. "Inspector Kramer is on his way," Malloy said. Wolf nodded once. "Good." I reached for the phone, because suddenly the brownstone felt less like a fortress and more like a stage, and I did not like stages when I did not know who had written the script. Then I heard it upstairs, a faint, unmistakable sound, the soft click of the orchid room door closing. Wolf's eyes lifted, and for the first time in a long time I saw something in them that looked very close to alarm, because orchid hour had already ended for the day, and Wolf had not gone upstairs. Chapter 2. If you want to see how quickly the police can make a brownstone feel like a public hallway, you only need one dead woman with a tidy name and a messy question mark. By the time Inspector Kramer arrived, the house had lost its private silence. It had the charged stillness of a room where people have decided they are entitled to look wherever they please. Kramer came in with Malloy and Stebbins, and 2 uniforms I did not know. He took off his hat, glared at me as if I had scheduled the homicide for his convenience, and then turned his glare on Wolf, as if Wolf had committed it for sport. "Wolf," he growled, "you got a woman killed 3 blocks from your front door an hour after she waltzed through your house. You want to explain that?" Wolf was seated behind his desk, composed, hands folded, eyes calm. He looked as if the crowd in his office was an inconvenience rather than a legal event. "I did not invite her," Wolf said. "I did not strike her. I did not pursue her. I did not even accept her vulgar attempt at extortion." Kramer's eyes narrowed. "Extortion," she claimed, Wolf said. "That she could name my only regret. She declined payment to depart. She issued vague warnings about my household schedule. Then she left." Kramer looked at me. "Goodwin." I gave him the short version, with the long version ready if he wanted to start throwing furniture. Stebbins, who had been hovering near the doorway with his notebook like a faithful instrument, scribbled industriously. Malloy stood straight and solemn, as if he were trying to keep the case from spilling on Wolf's carpet. Kramer's jaw tightened when I finished. "So she comes in here, announces she knows your regret, talks about rhythms, and then winds up dead. That makes her either a kook or a messenger." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Yes," Kramer snorted. "And it makes you the center of it, whether you like it or not." Wolf did not argue. That alone told me the thing had teeth. Kramer stepped closer to the desk. "We found her handbag. We found her keys. We found a notebook. You want to hear what was in it?" "I have no interest in your dramatics," Wolf said. Kramer's mouth twisted. "Too bad." He nodded to Stebbins. Stebbins stepped forward, opened his notebook, and read with the earnest precision of a man who believes ink is truth. "We found a torn scrap of paper in the victim's coat pocket," Stebbins said. "One line quote, 'Ask Wolf about the stairwell in Belgrade,' end quote." The office went still. It was not the usual stillness. Wolf's stillness is normally a kind of mass, heavy but controlled. This was different. It was the sudden absence of movement, like a machine that has been turned off at the switch. Wolf's eyes did not widen, his face did not change, but something inside him stopped and held. I saw it, and I filed it away, the way you file away a razor behind a sock, quietly, carefully, and with the awareness that you might need it when the room turns. Kramer watched Wolf's face, because Kramer has spent a career hoping to catch Wolf in a tell. "You know what that means," Kramer said. Wolf's voice was flat. "I know what the words mean." Kramer leaned in slightly. "Belgrade stairwell. That ring any bells, Wolf." Wolf's gaze was cold. "You will not interrogate me in my office, with insinuations." Kramer's cheeks reddened. "I'll interrogate you anywhere I please if it keeps me from having to scrape more people off the pavement." Wolf did not flinch. He said, "The words are intended to provoke me." Kramer barked a short laugh. "Looks like it worked." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "It worked only insofar as it confirms what I already suspected. Miss Hart was not here by accident. She was directed." Kramer turned his head toward me. "Goodwin, did she mention Belgrade?" "No," I said. "Not a syllable. She said past, rhythm, regret, and warned about somebody living in the house without living here. That was it. Stebbins cleared his throat eager. Inspector, there's more. Kramer waved. Go on. Stebbins glanced down at his notes. Phone records. The victim received a call at 9:10 p.m. yesterday. Before she came here, I said. Yes, Stebbins replied. She arrived at Mr. Wolf's house after that call. She left here, and within an hour she was dead. We traced the call. It was made from a payphone. Kramer grunted. Convenient, Stebbins continued. The witness at the diner near the payphone said the caller was a man, medium build, hat pulled low, spoke briefly and left. Kramer looked at Wolf again. What did the call say? Stebbins hesitated. We can't know, sir. Wolf spoke, voice calm and decisive. The call told her when I would be alone. Kramer's eyes narrowed. How do you know? Wolf's gaze did not move. Because she came at precisely the hour when my household is most predictable. Before dinner, after orchid time, while Fritz is occupied in the kitchen, and my associate is likely at his desk. She came when she could expect minimal interruption and maximum privacy. Kramer looked at me suspicious. You telling me your schedule is that fixed? I said. Wolf's schedule is fixed enough that the city sets its watches by it. Some of us just pretend we have flexibility. Kramer's jaw tightened. So the call at 9:10 told her when you'd be alone. She comes here, she leaves, she dies. And her notebook says, ask Wolf about the stairwell in Belgrade. That sounds like someone pushing buttons. Wolf's voice was low. Yes, Kramer leaned forward. You going to tell me what Belgrade has to do with you? Wolf's eyes were cold. Number Kramer's face darkened. Wolf's tone sharpened. Inspector, you may bully a pickpocket into confession. You will not bully me into exposing a matter that is irrelevant to a murder unless and until I determine its relevance. Kramer stared at him. Then he huffed and turned away, because Kramer knows that pushing Wolf harder usually results in Wolf pushing back with better leverage. All right, Kramer said. Then we do this the other way. We go through your house. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Number Kramer's eyebrows jumped. Number no, Wolf repeated. This is my home. You have no warrant. Kramer's mouth tightened. I can get one. Wolf nodded once. You may attempt. Meanwhile, you will accomplish nothing, except inconveniencing Fritz. Fritz, as if summoned by the mention of his name, appeared in the doorway with a tray in his hands. The tray held a coffee service arranged like a small altar. Fritz's face was calm. His eyes took in the policeman in the office and did not show alarm. Fritz has lived with Wolf long enough to know that men with badges are simply another kind of complication. Inspector, Fritz said politely, and placed the tray on a side table as if entertaining law enforcement were an ordinary part of household management. Kramer's cheeks reddened again. He hates being civilized at. All right, Kramer said. No search for now. But I want statements. I want times. I want everyone in this house accounted for last night. Wolf's voice remained calm. You may have the facts. You will not have chaos. Kramer pointed his thumb toward Malloy. Malloy, take Goodwin's statement. Stebbins, get Fritz's. Then get Horstman's. I want a timeline. Stebbins looked uncertain. Horstman, sir. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Mr. Horstman is upstairs with the orchids. You will not disturb him. Kramer glared. Wolf, a woman is dead. Wolf's voice was flat. I am aware. Disturbing the orchid rooms will not revive her. Kramer's jaw worked. He took a breath, then said, fine later. Malloy pulled me aside, notebook ready, while Stebbins went to the doorway and politely asked Fritz for times and movements. Fritz answered with calm precision, which is a dangerous thing to do around police because it makes them suspect you of rehearsing. I gave Malloy my statement. Times, movements. The minute Lila Hart entered, the minute she left, the minute the bell rang for the police. I did not mention Wolf's reaction to the word Belgrade, because that was not Malloy's business. It was Wolf's vulnerability, and I keep those in the locked drawer." When I finished, Malloy nodded, grateful for cooperation, and stepped back. Kramer looked at Wolf again. "You're going to stay put." Wolf's eyes were cold. "I am always put," Kramer grunted. "Don't get clever. If I find out you're hiding something about that Belgrade line, I'll come back with a warrant and a marching band." Wolf's voice was mild. "You would enjoy that." Kramer snorted and headed toward the door with his men. At the threshold he stopped and looked back. "One more thing," he said. "If your house schedule is as predictable as you say, then the killer could be somebody who's watched you, or somebody who used to belong here." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Yes." Kramer pointed a finger. "Think about that." Then he was gone, and the brownstone's air tried to become private again. It did not succeed, not with that sentence sitting in the room like a loaded object. "Ask Wolf about the stairwell in Belgrade." I went back into the office. Wolf sat very still, eyes lowered, hands folded. Fritz hovered in the doorway, watching Wolf with quiet concern. Wolf spoke first. "Archie," he said. "Yes. Someone knew the household schedule well enough to weaponize it," Wolf said. "That includes knowledge of my solitary intervals, Fritz's duties, and your predictable position. Miss Hart was told when to come. She was then eliminated with speed and confidence." I said, "Meaning the killer is either close or careful, or both." Wolf nodded once. "Both." I tried for lightness because the room needed it, and because I do that when the air feels sharp. "Should I put a sign on the door, schedule subject to change?" Wolf's eyes lifted to me. They were calm again, but there was steel underneath. "You will find who knew the schedule. You will find who could use the word Belgrade as a lever. You will find who wanted me provoked inside my own house." Fritz spoke quietly. "Mr. Wolf, shall I change the locks?" Wolf did not answer immediately. He sat for a moment, listening to the house as if it might confess through its pipes. Then he said, "Yes, and we will also change the rhythm." That was Wolf admitting danger without saying fear. I said, "Where do I start?" Wolf's gaze hardened, with the obvious. "Who has been in this house recently? Who has reason to know my habits? Who has the audacity to approach me through my past? And Archie." "Yes, go upstairs," Wolf said. "Inspect the orchid room door. Determine whether it was closed by Mr. Horseman or by someone else." I stood up, and as I did, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I did not answer it yet. I did not even look. In Wolf's house, when the rhythm is threatened, the first duty is to listen. I went up the stairs, each step familiar and suddenly suspicious, and I realized the case had shifted. Lila Hart was dead in an alley, but the murder had already reached into the brownstone. The past was in the house, just as she said, and somebody wanted Wolf to open the door to it. Chapter 3. The trouble with a dead woman is that she stops answering questions, and the living start answering them too eagerly. Wolf says that is why murder investigations grow mushrooms. Everybody wants to be useful, and everybody wants to be innocent, and those two urges seldom share the same facts. The brownstone did not feel like itself that morning the police had left, but they had dragged their atmosphere behind them like wet footprints. Even Fritz was quieter than usual, and Fritz's quiet is ordinarily a comforting thing. This time it felt cautious. Horstman upstairs was tending the orchids with his usual devotion, but even that ritual seemed less soothing after you have heard the orchid room door close at a time. It should not have. Wolf was in his office, planted in his chair, hands folded, eyes lowered. When Wolf sits like that, he resembles a monument erected to patience. The patience is real, but it is not passive. It is a trap. "You will trace Miss Hart's last day," Wolf told me. "Every hour, every step, every person who touched her time." I asked, "And the blind spot in the hall, you want me to trace that too?" His eyes lifted. "We will return to the house's geometry. First we require her geometry. She did not die because she took a wrong turn. She died because someone turned her." I went out with a list in my head and a cold in my bones that had nothing to do with weather. New York looked like New York, which is to say indifferent. The city does not change its expression because one woman has been murdered. It continues selling coffee and shouting at traffic and making rent. That indifference can be helpful. It keeps witnesses from getting melodramatic. It also keeps predators comfortable. Lila Hart's address was in her wallet, and Kramer's men had already been there. But I went anyway. I prefer to hear details from mouths, instead of from reports. Reports are tidy, and murder is not. The building was a respectable walk, up on the west side. The hall smelled of boiled cabbage and floor polish. I buzzed the superintendent, and got no answer, which was fine because the landlady answered the door with the speed of a woman who considers information a currency. She looked me over from hair to shoes and decided I was not the police, which made me interesting. "You're the one from that detective's house," she said. "That depends," I replied. "Do you have a better detective in mind?" Her lips tightened, almost a smile. "Lila went to see that big man, didn't she?" "She did," I said. "I need to know what she did before that." The landlady hesitated, just long enough to establish she had the right to hesitate, then stepped aside. Her apartment smelled of onions and certainty. She sat me down without asking, then leaned on the arm of her chair as if we were about to discuss a mutual relative. She was quiet, the landlady said. Paid on time, didn't bring men, didn't bring trouble. Then this week she started bringing it all by herself. "What kind of trouble?" I asked. "Nervous trouble," she said, jumping when the phone rang, looking down the hall like she expected somebody to be there, asking me if I'd seen anyone. "Did you?" I asked. She sniffed. "I see plenty, nothing I can name. That's how it works. People slip through like water." "Yesterday," I said. "What time did she leave?" "Morning," she said. 9-ish, came back around noon, then left again maybe 3. Came back once for 5 minutes, grabbed something, and left like she'd seen the devil in the sink." "What did she grab?" I asked. "A folder," she said. "Brown thick." Clutched it like it was money. "Any visitors?" I asked. The landlady pursed her lips. "Not in the building, but when she came back at noon, she looked like she'd been followed. She kept turning her head like she wanted to catch somebody in the act of looking." "Did she mention a name?" I asked. "She mentioned one place," the landlady said. "A print shop. She said she needed copies. She said it like she needed armor." That was good enough to keep me moving. I left and called Saul Panzer from a payphone because I did not like the idea of someone listening to the rhythm of my day too. Saul answered on the second ring, which is Saul's way of telling you he is always slightly ahead of you. "Saul," I said, "I need a private investigator who worked with a woman named Lila Hart yesterday morning." Saul did not ask why. That is also Saul's way. "Raffi Pritchard," Saul said after a pause. "3rd Avenue. He owes me a favor and 2 apologies. Send me the address." I said. Saul did. And I went. Pritchard's office was on the 3rd floor of a building that had long ago stopped pretending it was elegant. The hallway smelled of old paper and new desperation. His door had his name in paint that had chipped around the edges, which I took as honest advertising. Pritchard himself was a man in his 50s, with a face that looked as if it had been punched often enough to stop taking it personally. He eyed me the way a man eyes a bill collector. "If you're here to collect," he said, "you're late. If you're here to threaten, take a number." "I'm here about Lila Hart," I said. His expression shifted, not into grief, but into caution. "She's dead." "Yes," I said. "You saw her yesterday." He hesitated, then waved me into a chair that creaked like a confession. "She came to me 2 weeks ago," he said. "Wanted old records pulled. Immigration, entry logs, name changes." "Why?" I asked. "She said she was looking for a man who wasn't supposed to exist," Pritchard replied. "I thought it was a romantic mess. It wasn't." "Did she show you a photo?" I asked. He nodded and pulled open a drawer, then stopped. "Polis took most of it." "What did you keep?" I asked. He stared at me, then slid a photocopy across the desk. An immigration record, Slavic name, a date, a port of entry, a notation about adjustment. Nothing that would make a newspaper headline, but enough to make a careful woman tremble. "She got hold of that name," Pritchard said. She thought it tied to Wolf. Did she say Wolf? I asked. She didn't have to, Pritchard said. She described him, big man, brownstone orchids. She said if she said his name out loud, she'd feel like she'd stepped on a wire. I leaned forward. What time did she come in yesterday? 10:30, he said. Stayed 20 minutes. Left with copies and a list of places she planned to visit. Which places? I asked. He handed me the list: City Archives, Immigration Attorney, Print Shop. She was shaking, Pritchard added. Not the delicate shaking people do when they want you to comfort them, real fear. Like she had finally found what she was looking for and regretted it. Did she mention the word Belgrade? I asked. Pritchard's mouth tightened. Once like she hated it. She said something about a stairwell. That made my stomach do a small, slow turn. Did she say who was after her? I asked. Pritchard shook his head. She didn't name, she implied. She said someone knew the house. Said the house had a rhythm. I thought she was being poetic. She was being practical. Did she receive any calls while she was with you? I asked. No, he said. But she checked her phone twice like she expected it to bite her. I left him and went to the city records office. A place like that can make you nostalgic for the police, because at least the police admit they are not there to help you. Records offices pretend they are serving the public while punishing it. A clerk confirmed Lila Hart had requested copies and paid an expedite fee. She did not remember details, but she remembered the manner. She kept looking over her shoulder, the clerk said. Like she thought someone was standing too close. Did she say anything? I asked. She asked where the exit was, the clerk replied. Not the nearest one, the one with the least foot traffic. That was not a romantic fear, that was trained fear. Then I went to the print shop. It was a small storefront on a side street, fluorescent lighting, piles of paper, machines humming with the weary sound of commerce. The clerk behind the counter was young, with ink on his fingers and boredom in his posture until I said the name. Lila Hart, I repeated. He swallowed. Yeah, I remember her. Why? I asked. Because she was trembling, he said. Not cold, not nerves. Like she was trying to keep her hands from betraying her. What did she copy? I asked. Documents, he said. Immigration stuff, also a photo. She asked for 3 sets. 1 set she sealed in an envelope and addressed right there at the counter. 3, I said. Did she explain why? No, he said. She just said she needed backups. That word, backups, is a word people use when they expect trouble. It is also a word people use when they intend to leave something behind. The clerk leaned in a little, eager now. She went outside while I was copying. Why? I asked. He licked his lips. There was a guy across the street, tall, wearing a cap low, standing like he was waiting for a bus that never came. Did she react? I asked. She went pale, he said. She kept staring through the glass. Then she came back in and told me to hurry. Then she went outside again, and when she came back she was calmer, too calm, like she'd decided something. Did the man move? I asked. No, the clerk said. He just stood there. Did you see his face? I asked. Cap and scarf, he said, but he was tall, and he didn't fidget. That's what stuck, like he had nowhere else to be. I asked about security footage. He pointed to a camera that looked like it could record a ghost, with blurry disappointment. He said he could not give it to me without the police, but he promised it would be there when the police asked. I made sure he understood. I would remind the police. Then I went to the alley. It was 3 blocks from the brownstone, which made it feel personal. The alley was narrow, damp, and smelled of old brick and indifference. There was a faint stain where her body had been, and a few chalk marks that had already begun to blur. Because the city does not respect evidence. A uniform told me there were no obvious signs of struggle. Medical examiner thinks poison or suffocation, he said. Nothing dramatic. That was the point. Dramatic makes witnesses. Quiet makes control. I stood there a moment and tried to imagine Lila Hart walking into that alley. A woman who had just faced a tall man outside a print shop, who had just entered Wolf's house and spoken about regret like it was a weapon. A woman who knew she was being watched. Why would she go into a dark alley 3 blocks from her destination unless someone guided her there, or unless she believed she had to? I went back to the brownstone with the pieces of her day lined up in my mind like an unpleasant parade. Wolf listened while I reported. He sat in his chair, beer at hand, eyes half narrowed. She met a private investigator, I said. Pulled immigration records, paid for expedited copies, went to a print shop and made 3 sets. The clerk says she trembled when she saw a tall man waiting outside, cap low, face hidden. She left with the copies, and within hours she came here. Wolf's eyes narrowed further. 3 sets implies distribution. She intended to give proof to more than one recipient. She intended to make herself harder to erase, I said. Yes, Wolf replied, and failed. I hesitated, then added. The investigator said she mentioned Belgrade, a stairwell. Wolf's face did not change, but the air did. I did not press. I had learned the hard way that pressing Wolf on his buried matters is like pressing a locked safe with your thumb. You do not open it, you only bruise yourself. Now, Wolf said, we returned to the house. He stood, and I followed him into the hall. Fritz appeared in the kitchen doorway, concerned. Mr. Wolf, Fritz began. He stared at it as if it were a diagram. Stand in the office doorway, he told me. I did. Wolf remained in the hall. Look at me, he said. I could see him clearly. Now step 2 paces to your right, Wolf said. I stepped. Wolf shifted toward the stairwell. For an instant he vanished, hidden by the angle of the wall and the rise of the banister, a pocket of invisibility, small but perfect. There, Wolf said. A blind spot, I murmured. A blind spot I have known for years, Wolf replied. And so has Fritz, and so have you, though you have never named it. Fritz spoke quietly, almost apologetic. The beer, Mr. Wolf. Wolf turned his head slightly. Exactly, Fritz. Fritz blinked, Wolf continued. Fritz brings my beer at habitual times. That habit is comfort, and it is also a signal. A man who knows the schedule can time movement so that Fritz is occupied, Archie is at his desk, and I am engaged. He can pass through that blind spot, reach the stairs and vanish from view. My throat tightened. The click I had heard upstairs the day before found its place in the picture. You think someone was there while she was in the office, I said. Wolf nodded. Listening, perhaps, or moving, either is intolerable. That's too close, I said, too intimate. Wolf's voice was quiet. Yes, it is intimacy. He turned back toward the office, and the winter light coming in the front windows made his face look harder than usual. Only 2 kinds of people know routines that well, Wolf said. Family and predators. I stared at him. We don't have family. Wolf's gaze did not soften. Then we have a predator. We returned to the office. Wolf sat. I sat. Fritz retreated with the careful quiet of a man who does not want his footsteps to become part of the evidence. Wolf said, Archie, we require her copies. There were 3 sets. 1 is missing. The missing set will tell us who she intended to expose. And the tall man outside the print shop? I added. Yes, Wolf said. Identify him. A cap and scarf are not invisibility. They are arrogance. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was short. The stairwell is closer than you think. I showed it to Wolf. He read it and handed it back without comment. Then his eyes lifted toward the ceiling as if he could see through plaster and wood. The predator is speaking, Wolf said softly. And he's confident, I said. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Then we will deprive him of confidence. That would have felt better if the house had not chosen that moment to make a small sound upstairs. A faint creak, like a careful foot-shifting weight. I held my breath. Wolf did not move, but his eyes stayed on the ceiling. His voice was calm, but it had sharpened. Archie, Wolf said quietly, do not run, do not call out. Go to the hall, stand where you can see the stairs. I did slowly, because suddenly every step felt like it belonged to someone else's rhythm. And the brownstone, which had always been Wolf's fortress, felt like a building full of angles waiting to prove who had been living in it without living there. Chapter 4. Saul Panzer has a way of delivering information that makes you feel both grateful and irritated. Grateful because he finds what you did not find. Irritated because he finds it as if it were lying on the sidewalk with a sign on it. He came to the brownstone late afternoon, hat in hand, coat collar up against the winter, and that faint look of calm competence that makes people want to confess just to keep up. Wolf had resumed his schedule with a vengeance, as if routine could be used like mortar to patch a cracked wall. He had taken his orchid hour without commentary, eaten Fritz's lunch with appropriate appreciation, and sat in his office, as if the only unusual thing in his day had been the police's lack of manners. But I had learned to recognize the difference between Wolf resting and Wolf waiting. This was waiting. Saul was shown in and took the red leather chair without being invited, which told me he was carrying something heavy. "Well," I said, "if you're going to sit like a client, you might as well pay the fee." Saul's mouth twitched. "I'll pay in facts." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Proceed." Saul reached into his coat pocket and produced a small slip of paper. "Miss Lila Hart rented a storage locker 2 weeks ago." My spine tightened. Under her name, Saul shook his head. Under a false one, Linda Haynes, cash deposit, 3 months paid in advance. Wolf went still in a way that meant his mind had already started mapping. She anticipated trouble. Saul nodded. She expected it, or she planned it. Either way, she acted like a woman who believed time was short. I asked, "How did you find it?" Saul looked mildly offended. "I have friends in places where people pretend they have no friends." "That's poetic," I said. "Where is the locker?" Saul gave the address. It was in a warehouse district on the west side, a place where buildings look temporary even when they have been standing 50 years. Wolf said, "You have obtained access." Saul's eyebrows lifted a fraction. The manager likes money and dislikes questions. He allowed me to view the contents, and I made copies. Nothing left that locker in my hands. Wolf's eyes narrowed. "And?" Saul hesitated, then produced a photograph in a protective sleeve and set it on Wolf's desk. "A copy," he added. I leaned forward. Wolf did not. The photo was old, black and white, edges worn. 2 men stood together. One was unmistakably Wolf, younger than I had ever seen him, still large but less settled, wearing a coat that looked like it had been chosen for function and not for comfort. The other man was tall and lean, face half turned, with a scar that ran along his ear like a crude signature, a scarred ear. The name in my head snapped to the print shop clerk's description, tall cap low. Stillness. Wolf's face did not change, but his eyes were colder now. Saul said quietly. There was also a letter. He placed a photocopy on Wolf's desk. An envelope addressed in neat handwriting to no street, no city, no stamp. It had never been mailed. Wolf did not touch it. "You read it?" Saul nodded once. "Yes." "And it was signed," Wolf said. Saul's voice was flat. "Evan Drake." The air in the office changed. Not into panic, not into anger, but into a kind of compressed pressure, as if the house had remembered something it did not like. Wolf's eyes stayed on the envelope. His voice was mild, which in Wolf is sometimes more dangerous than a shout. "You will leave that," Wolf said. Saul nodded. "I will leave it, but you will not pretend it does not exist." I looked at Wolf. Evan Drake. Wolf's gaze lifted to me for a moment, and in that moment I saw a refusal so complete, it was almost physical. "You have never heard the name," Wolf said, "because it is not part of your life." "Apparently, it just became part of my life," I said. Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Not yet." Saul cleared his throat. "The letter is not long." Wolf did not move, I said. "Read it to us, Saul. If Wolf doesn't want to touch it, he can still hear it." Wolf's gaze flicked at me, warning. Saul did not wait for permission. Saul has never waited for permission when he believed he was right. He opened the envelope carefully, withdrew the letter, and read in a steady voice. The words were plain. No sentiment, no pleading. Just a clean statement of intent and threat. Evan Drake wrote that he knew what Wolf had done, that he knew what Wolf had chosen, and that he was tired of waiting for Wolf to admit the cost. He wrote that the past was not a story, it was a debt. He wrote that a stairwell in Belgrade was still standing, and so was the man who had not been supposed to survive it. He ended with one line that made my stomach tighten. "You have one regret. I will make you live inside it." Saul folded the letter and put it back into the envelope. He did not look at Wolf, he looked at me, and his eyes said what his mouth did not. This was personal. Wolf's face remained composed. He picked up his beer glass, took one slow swallow, and set it down as if marking a boundary. "This is provocation," Wolf said. I stared at him. "That is a threat." "It is both," Wolf replied. "And it is clumsy." Saul's eyebrows lifted. "Clumsy?" "Yes," Wolf said. "A man who wishes to control another does not usually announce his intention. He demonstrates it. Miss Hart is dead." "That is the demonstration. The letter is theater," I said. "The photo is not theater. That man's ear looks like it lost an argument with a knife." Wolf did not respond. He looked at the photo again, and this time his fingers moved, almost involuntarily, as if he were about to touch it and then restrained himself. Saul said, "There were other things in the locker, copies of documents, immigration filings, a list of names. Some are crossed out. One is circled." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Which?" Saul hesitated. "Not even Drake. Another name, a woman." Lila Hart wrote, "If he comes, show Wolf first." I asked, "Show Wolf?" "What?" Saul gestured toward the photo and the letter. "These." I felt a cold tightness settle under my ribs. Lila had built a small fortress of proof, and she had expected it to be attacked. Wolf spoke calmly. "Where is the locker now?" Saul's mouth tightened. "Locked. The manager put his own padlock on it after I left, because he is suddenly nervous." Wolf nodded once. "He should be," I said. "We need to secure it." "Police." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Number." I blinked. "Number. The police will arrive with boots and assumptions," Wolf said. "They will confiscate, misplace, and leak. We will do this correctly." Saul leaned forward. "Correctly is a luxury." Wolf's gaze was cold. "Correctly is necessary." I looked at Saul. Did anyone else know about that locker? Saul shook his head. "Not legally, but someone tried to learn it." That got my full attention. "Tried." Saul nodded. "The manager told me a man came late last night and asked questions, not directly, indirectly. Wanted to know which units were rented under cash names. Wanted to know if any were paid in advance." Wolf's voice stayed calm, and the manager told him. Saul's mouth tightened. "The manager says he did not, but men like that do not admit what they sell," I said. "What did the man look like?" Saul's eyes met mine. Tall, cap low, quiet, patient. I felt my throat tighten, scarred ear. Saul nodded once. The manager noticed the ear. Wolf's eyes narrowed. "So the predator seeks Miss Hart's proof." Saul's voice was flat. "Yes," I said. "And that means the proof matters." Wolf nodded once. "It matters to him, therefore it matters to us." The afternoon light had faded while we talked, and the brownstone's lamps made the office look warm and civilized, which felt like an insult. A murder case should not be allowed to sit in such comfort. Wolf spoke to Saul. "You will accompany Archie to the locker tonight." Saul's eyebrows lifted. "You want me there?" "I want competence," Wolf replied. Saul's mouth twitched. "That's almost a compliment." Wolf ignored that. He looked at me. "Archie, you will not go alone. If the man attempted entry last night, he will attempt again. He is persistent and practiced." I said, "Like the murder." Wolf's eyes hardened. "Precisely." Fritz appeared in the doorway then, silent as always, with a tray that held dinner's first act. Wolf barely glanced at it. Mr. Wolf, Fritz said softly, the food will not improve if it waits. Wolf grunted. It will wait. Fritz's face tightened slightly, which is Fritz's version of protest, and he withdrew. Saul stood. So we go tonight. Yes, Wolf said, and Archie will bring back what Miss Hart left. Saul paused at the doorway and looked at Wolf. You will tell him who Evan Drake is. Wolf's gaze was flat. In due course. Saul exhaled through his nose and left. I stayed, because I am paid to stay. I looked at Wolf, at the photo on his desk, at the envelope that had never been mailed. Belgrade, I said quietly. Stairwell. Wolf's eyes remained on the photo. Yes. Was it wartime? I asked. Wolf's gaze lifted, and the refusal returned. But beneath it was something else. A hard edge that was not pride. It was long ago, Wolf said. That's not an answer. It is the only one you will receive now, Wolf replied. I leaned forward. Wolf, if someone is walking through our blind spot and closing doors upstairs, I'd like to know what kind of ghost we're dealing with. Wolf's voice was calm. A human ghost is the most dangerous kind. It believes it deserves attention. My phone buzzed. Unknown number again. This time, the message was shorter. Locker first. Then the house. I showed Wolf. He read it, and for the first time his mouth tightened in something that looked very close to anger. He is making appointments, I said. Wolf's eyes were cold. Then we will be punctual. That evening, Saul and I headed for the storage warehouse with a key borrowed from a nervous manager, and a bad feeling that had already learned the route. We arrived late, because late is when predators like to work. The building was a long, low block of concrete and corrugated metal, lit by harsh lamps that made every shadow look guilty. The manager met us at the front office, sweating despite the cold, and unlocked the corridor to the lockers with hands that shook just enough to admit he was scared. You can look, he whispered, but I'm telling you, someone came last night. Quiet. Tried my back door, didn't break it, just tested it. Like he was checking for later. Saul's eyes were steady. Mine were not. We went down the corridor, rows of metal doors on both sides, each one a private secret behind a cheap lock. The locker labeled for Linda Haynes was at the far end. The manager unlocked it, stepped back quickly, and let us do the breathing. Inside were 3 cardboard boxes, a file folder, and a small metal tin. Saul turned on his flashlight and angled it across the contents. Move fast, Saul murmured. We are not alone. I opened the file folder first, copies of immigration records, name changes, a photocopy of the photo Wolf had kept. Another set of the letter to NW, and beneath it, a handwritten list of dates, places, and one word repeated 3 times in the margin. Belgrade. Saul was lifting the metal tin when we heard the sound. Not footsteps, not a door creak. A soft, deliberate click from the corridor behind us, like a lock being tested by someone who already knew exactly how much pressure it could take. Saul's flashlight snapped toward the corridor. I felt my pulse jump, because the attempt to break into the locker was not a past event anymore. It had just arrived on schedule. Chapter 5. The click behind us in the storage corridor was not the sound of a man barging into trouble. It was the sound of a man confirming that trouble was where he had left it. Saul's flashlight cut a hard white stripe down the aisle of metal doors. My right hand went automatically to the inside pocket where I kept a compact persuader. Not because I expected a gunfight in a rental hallway, but because my body prefers preparation to optimism. Back, Saul murmured. The manager, who had been hovering near the intersection like a guilty parent, made a small choking noise and retreated, so fast he nearly tripped over his own fear. Saul stepped out first, shoulders squared, light steady. I followed half a pace behind him, keeping the locker at our backs. If somebody wanted the contents, he had to come through us. The corridor was empty. That was the part that made my neck prickle. Empty corridors are useful to people who know how to move quietly and do not mind being patient. Saul angled the light left, then right, then down the long stretch of doors. No silhouette, no movement, no cough, no scrape of shoe leather. Maybe the building settled, I offered. Saul's mouth tightened. Buildings do not test locks. He walked toward the sound, slow and controlled. I went with him, and we found the back service door at the far end of the corridor. A cheap latch, a cheap lock, the kind of lock that keeps out honest people and invites everyone else to work a little. Saul bent, examined it, then straightened. Summoned and tried it gently. No damage. Testing, I said. Saul nodded. He wanted to know whether it was worth coming back with tools. I looked at the door, then at the corridor, then at the long line of lockers full of other people's secrets. He knows we are here. Saul's eyes stayed hard. He knows we are predictable. That is why he is comfortable. We went back to the locker and did what you do when you have been warned that time has teeth. We moved faster. We took everything that mattered, the list of dates and places, the copies of immigration filings, the photo, the letter, the handwritten notes with Belgrade, repeated like an infection. We left behind the boxes of nothing and the little odds and ends Lila Hart had stored to make the locker look ordinary. The tin Saul had picked up held only a few personal items and a folded piece of paper with a phone number and 2 initials. Next to a note in Hart's hand, if I'm taken, mail the 3rd set to this number's lawyer. Not much that helped me then, but plenty that would matter later. When we were done, Saul shut the locker and snapped the padlock closed. The sound was loud in the narrow hallway. I almost hoped it would lure our unseen visitor into making a mistake. It did not. We got out clean, with the manager sweating behind his counter and insisting he would close early and never rent another locker again. Saul gave him a look that implied he should have had that idea before accepting cash under fake names. We drove back to the brownstone in a cab that smelled of wet wool and cheap cologne, and I spent the ride trying to decide which was worse. The man who was watching us, or the fact that he could do it so calmly. Wolf was waiting in his office, as if he had not moved since we left, which is often true. Fritz had kept dinner warm, which is his quiet heroism, and Horstman had been upstairs with the orchids, which is his quiet stubbornness. The house looked normal again, and that normality made me want to kick something. Saul placed the folder on Wolf's desk with care. Wolf did not touch it at first. He watched Saul's face instead. Then mine. You were approached, Wolf said. Not directly, Saul replied. We were tested. Someone tried the back service door while we were inside. Quiet. Practiced. Wolf's eyes narrowed, as with the murder. Yes, I said. He did not want a scene. He wanted certainty. Wolf nodded once, and at that nod I felt the faintest relief. Wolf likes certainty too, but he prefers to be the man holding it. He opened the folder. The photo was on top, and Wolf stared at it the way a man stares at a stain that will not wash out. Then he slid it aside and removed the letter in its unmailed envelope. He did not open it. He had heard it. Hearing was enough. He moved on to the documents. I watched his hands. Wolf's hands are not expressive, but they can reveal things when his mind is occupied. His fingers tightened once on the edge of a paper, then relaxed. He turned a page with a motion that was too precise. I had seen that motion before, when Wolf was controlling his temper by controlling his fingertips. What else? Wolf said. A said, there are immigration filings, name changes, and a list Lila wrote. Dates, places, and Belgrade scribbled in the margins like she wanted to hammer the nail in. Also a phone number with initials, probably her personal insurance. Nothing obvious, Saul added. The manager confirmed the tall man came last night. Cap low, scarred ear, quiet, patient. Wolf's eyes lifted. Scarred ear. Saul nodded. He noticed it. He remembers it. Wolf looked down again, turned another page, and then stopped. The shift was small. It was not the dramatic pause you get in theater. It was the pause you get when a man reads something that changes the cost of his silence. He held up a document. Archie. I stood, stepped around the desk, and leaned over. It was a birth certificate. The name on it was Lila Hart, and under Father, printed in official type, was Evan Drake. For a moment I did not feel clever, I felt slow. The kind of slow you feel when you realize you have been chasing the wrong shape. I looked at Wolf. She was his daughter. Wolf's face stayed composed, but his eyes had a new hardness to them, like stone that has been struck and remembers it. Saul's voice was low. So she wasn't just a messenger, she was a lever. I straightened, and she came here for answers. Wolf set the birth certificate down with deliberate care. Yes. Did she know? I asked. She knew enough, Wolf replied. She sought records, she made copies, she arranged insurance. She came to my house and offered provocation as a key. Saul leaned forward, and someone made sure she got silence instead. Wolf's gaze did not soften. Yes. I waited, because the name Evan Drake sat in the room like a loaded object. Wolf had refused to discuss it. Now the dead woman had put it on paper with a seal. Wolf said quietly, "Archie, you wanted a definition of intimacy." I nodded. This feels like it. Wolf's eyes narrowed. It is not only knowledge of my household. It is knowledge of my past. Miss Hart was not killed merely to prevent her from speaking. She was killed to prevent her from hearing. I stared. Hearing what? Wolf's mouth tightened. He looked at the photo again, at his younger self beside a tall man with a damaged ear. Then he spoke carefully. Evan Drake was once close, Wolf said. Saul's eyebrows lifted, but he did not interrupt. Wolf continued. He was once useful. He was once connected to a mistake I regret. That was more than I had expected, and it came out in my tone. A mistake, Wolf. You just admitted you have one. Wolf's eyes flicked to me. Do not be childish. I'm not, I said. I'm curious and wary. If he is close enough to know your routines, then he is close enough to have been here. Wolf's gaze hardened. He has not been here. Not invited. That does not stop predators, Saul said. Wolf nodded once. I tapped the birth certificate lightly, because if I did not touch something, my mind would touch the wrong thing. So Lila Hart, Drake's daughter, comes to you. She says she can name your regret. She gets killed an hour later. That means Drake either wanted her silent or wanted her dead for being used against him. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Do not assume Drake's desire is singular. A man can want multiple outcomes. He can also allow others to use his name, Saul said. The message about the locker suggests the predator is controlling steps, not reacting. Yes, Wolf replied. And Lila's notebook line, I added. Ask Wolf about the stairwell in Belgrade. That line was meant to hit you. Wolf's expression did not change. Yes, I looked at him. So it is true. Wolf did not answer immediately. Then he said, it is connected. Saul's voice was mild, but his eyes were sharp. Connected to what? Wolf. Wolf's gaze shifted to the window for a moment, where the winter light was fading. When he spoke again, his tone was flat. To a time when I was not insulated by orchids, Wolf said, and to a man who believes he is owed. That's a biography, I said, not a confession. Wolf's eyes narrowed. You will receive what you need, Archie, not what you want. I was about to push, because I am paid to be persistent, when Fritz appeared in the doorway with a look that was polite but disturbed. Fritz looks disturbed only when the house has been insulted. Mr. Wolf, Fritz said, there is a delivery. Wolf frowned. At this hour. Fritz's voice stayed calm. Orchids. My stomach tightened. Horstman. Fritz shook his head. It is not from Mr. Horstman. It is a delivery man, with a box and a receipt. Wolf's eyes narrowed to slits. Bring it. Fritz hesitated. Then withdrew. A moment later he returned carrying a long box of the sort, used for plants. The cardboard was clean. The string was tied neatly. The label bore the name of a reputable florist. The time was wrong. Orchid deliveries are scheduled, confirmed, and received with ceremony. This one had arrived like a man walking into a church during a sermon. Wolf stared at the box as if it had insulted him personally. Who brought it? Fritz replied. A young man. He did not step inside. He said it was paid. He asked if you wished a signature. And you gave him one, Wolf said. Fritz's eyes tightened slightly. No, Mr. Wolf, I said the recipient would decide. He left quickly. Saul leaned forward. That is a probe. I nodded, testing the house like a lock. Wolf did not move, he said. Archie, open it. I said, with pleasure, in the tone of a man who knows he is lying. I took a pen from my desk, slid it under the string, and lifted the lid cautiously. Inside was not an orchid. It was packing paper. Beneath the paper was an empty plastic tray meant to hold stems. At the bottom, taped flat, was a small envelope. I removed it, held it up, and saw my own name typed neatly on the front. Archie Goodwin. Saul's eyes narrowed. Fritz's face went pale. Wolf's voice was very calm. Open it. I did. Inside was a single card with a line printed in clean black letters. Your schedule is not yours anymore. I read it once, then again, because I wanted it to be less true the second time. Wolf watched me, then said, That is the second test. Saul's voice was low. The first was the locker, and the first was the house blind spot. I added. Wolf nodded once. Yes, he is confirming his access. He is also confirming our attention. I looked at the card and felt the irritation rise, hot and useless. He wants us jumpy. Wolf's eyes were cold. He wants us obedient. Saul's mouth tightened. What do we do? Wolf's gaze moved to the birth certificate again, then to the photo, then to the envelope from the fake orchid delivery. He seemed to fit them together without moving his hands. We will change the rhythm, Wolf said, not by hiding, by baiting. I frowned. Baiting with what? Wolf's eyes lifted to mine, with the only thing he has demanded. I felt my throat tighten. Your regret. Wolf's voice was calm. Yes, Fritz spoke softly. Mr. Wolf, this is dangerous. Wolf turned his head slightly. So is allowing a predator to dictate our schedule. At least danger chosen is danger controlled. He looked back at me. Archie, tomorrow you will visit the print shop again and obtain the footage. You will also locate the third set of copies Miss Hart made. She intended to place them beyond reach. That recipient is our next doorway. And Evan Drake, I said. Wolf's gaze did not soften. Evan Drake will come to us, or we will draw him. He reached for his beer, took a slow swallow, and set the glass down with the quiet finality that usually precedes one of his office gatherings. Until then, Wolf said, no one in this house follows the old habits. Fritz will alter mealtimes. Horstman will change orchid hours. You will not sit at your desk when you would normally sit. We will make the schedule a liar. Saul stood. You are turning your home into a maze. Wolf's eyes narrowed. It is already one. We have merely been walking the same route. I stared at the card again, at the clean printed threat, and felt the brownstone shift in my mind from fortress to battlefield. As Saul left, Fritz gathered the empty box with offended care, as if it were trash that had dared to pretend it belonged. Wolf sat still, and I could tell his mind was not on orchids or beer or even the police. It was on Belgrade, on a stairwell, and on a man with a scarred ear who had not yet stepped into the light. The card in my hand felt too light for the weight of the message, because if your schedule is not yours anymore, then the next thing someone steals is not your time, it is your safety. And I had the feeling the predator would not be satisfied with envelopes for long. Chapter 6. Changing a schedule is easy if you are a bachelor who eats when he pleases and sleeps when he drops. It is less easy in a brownstone where meals are timed like civic duties and orchids have rights. Wolf, however, approached the problem the way he approaches everything, as if the universe is obligated to obey a correct plan. Breakfast came 20 minutes late, lunch came 40 minutes early, and Fritz wore the strained politeness of a man being asked to serve soup in a hurricane. Horstman was instructed to shift orchid hour, and he took offense as if Wolf had suggested rearranging the petals by committee. I was told not to sit at my desk at the usual times, which meant I spent long stretches standing in doorways and pretending I was admiring Wolf's framed diplomas. The only thing not altered was Wolf's bulk, and even that looked like it had grown heavier with irritation. By mid-morning, the brownstone felt like it was trying to lie convincingly. That was when I saw him. It started with something as ordinary as a newsstand. There is a little one down the block, wedged between a storefront and a doorway that always smells faintly of cigarettes. I was in the front room pretending to read, because that is what you do when you are on watch and want to look innocent. The street outside was busy enough to hide a man, and quiet enough to reveal one if you knew how to look. A taxi rolled past, its glossy side briefly reflecting the opposite sidewalk. In that reflection I caught a figure standing too still near the newsstand. He was tall. His shoulders were square, his cap was pulled low. He was looking toward the brownstone without appearing to. The reflection lasted less than a second, but it was enough. I did not move at once. Predators notice sudden motion. Instead, I waited until a couple walked past the front window. Then I stepped back from the glass and went to the office. Wolf looked up from his book. "What is it?" I kept my voice casual, company. Across the street, tall, cap, stillness. Wolf's eyes narrowed. "You are certain?" "No," I said. "I am attentive." Wolf's mouth tightened. "Go." I went out the front door with the slow calm of a man who is merely stepping into the day. I did not look across the street. I did not look down the block. I walked to the corner, as if my only concern was getting a newspaper, then turned and crossed when the light changed. The man at the newsstand was still there. He was facing the rack, pretending to consider tabloids, but his eyes were angled toward the brownstone. When he saw me approach, he shifted his stance slightly, like a man preparing for a change in wind. I pretended to study the headlines, bought a paper I did not want, and drifted away. He drifted too. He did not follow closely. He followed correctly. 2 storefronts behind, then 3. He used the rhythm of pedestrians to mask his pace. He was good enough that I began to feel insulted on Wolf's behalf, because anyone good enough to watch our house with that kind of calm had no business being loose in New York. He turned west and headed toward 10th Avenue. I kept him in sight without letting him know he was being kept. It is a delicate balance. Too close and you get caught. Too far and you lose him in the city's cracks. He walked like a man with an appointment, not hurrying, not lingering. He cut into a diner on 10th that had a bright sign and dim morals. I waited half a minute, then followed. Inside, the diner was warm, crowded, and full of the smell of coffee that had given up trying. A counter ran along one side, booths along the other. The man took a booth near the back, angled so he could see the door and the street through the window. He removed his cap and set it on the seat beside him. I saw the ear. A scar ran along the edge, pale and jagged, like old damage that had been made permanent out of spite. I slid into a booth 2 rows away, back to the wall, and ordered coffee. The waitress looked at me with the empty stare of a woman who has heard too many men promise they are harmless. She poured anyway. The scarred man did not order. He sat with his hands folded on the table, eyes lowered, as if waiting for someone. 2 minutes later, a uniformed cop came in. The cop was not Malloy, not Stebbins, a different one, older, heavier, face bored with duty. He walked in, glanced around, and went straight to the scarred man's booth, as if it were natural. They did not shake hands. The cop slid into the seat opposite. The scarred man spoke without moving his head much. The cop listened with the slight frown of a man who is hearing instructions he does not like but will accept anyway because someone has made it worth his while. Then the scarred man slipped something across the table, a folded paper. Small and quick, like a bartender passing a napkin with a phone number. The cop palmed it without looking. They sat another minute, exchanged a few quiet words, and the cop stood and left. The scarred man waited 10 seconds, then put on his cap and left too, through the side door that led to a narrow passage between buildings. I left a dime on the table that did not cover the coffee and followed. I do not like owing diners money. I also do not like losing men. The cop headed east, walking at a steady pace, not like a man rushing to arrest someone, but like a man headed for a task he had done before. He did not go back toward the precinct. He went toward the courthouse. That was interesting enough to make my coffee regret itself. I tailed him at a distance that made me one more pedestrian among many. At the courthouse entrance, he did not go inside through the main doors. He went around to a side door used by staff and cops who want to avoid the public. He flashed his badge, entered and disappeared. I waited a beat, then went in through the main entrance. Once inside, I moved like a man with business, because in courthouses, looking lost is suspicious. I drifted toward the clerk windows, the kind of place where paperwork is born and dies. The cop emerged from a corridor and approached a clerk I recognized, not by name, but by the particular dead-eyed competence of a man who can stamp your hopes into a file. The clerk leaned forward. The cop slipped him the folded message with the same motion he had used in the diner. The clerk did not read it openly. He tucked it under a ledger, nodded once, and then, with a casual gesture that would look like nothing to anyone not watching, slid it into a tray marked incoming. A young woman at a side desk picked up the tray and carried it away. I watched the triangle complete itself. The scarred man to the cop to the clerk to the young woman. Influence drawn in grease and passed in paper. The question was, what kind of influence? I could not grab the message. That would have been rude and illegal, and Wolf hates rudeness more than he hates illegality. So I did the next best thing. I watched the young woman. She went down a corridor to a door marked records. She entered, stayed inside less than a minute, and came out without the message. She returned to her desk, sat down, and resumed typing as if she had just put a secret into a drawer where it belonged. Someone was moving paper through official hands to accomplish something that did not require a gun. By the time I got back to the brownstone, my nerves were tight, and my patience was thinner than Fritz's soup. Wolf was in his office, as expected. Saul Panzer was there too, sitting in the red leather chair like he owned it, which meant he had brought something worth owning. Saul looked at me. "You look like you've been shopping." "I have," I said. "I bought a coffee and a conspiracy." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Report," I told them. Newsstand reflection. Tall man, scarred ear, diner on 10th. Cop, folded message. Courthouse clerk, records room, triangle complete. Wolf's face remained composed, but his eyes had hardened. The courthouse. He is influencing a document. Saul nodded. Or blocking one. I looked at Saul. "You sound like you already knew where this was going." Saul's mouth twitched. "I dug while you walked." Wolf's gaze sharpened. "Proceed." Saul leaned forward slightly. "Evan Drake is not a ghost. He is a consultant now." I snorted. "That means nothing." "It means everything," Saul replied. Consultant is the word men use when they want to be paid for advice without being held responsible for outcomes. Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Continue," Saul said. "Clean suits, clean address, clean business cards, dirty favors. He is the kind of man who gets hired to make problems disappear without calling it extortion. He shows up early to meetings he should not attend. He knows schedules. He cultivates cops and clerks and managers. He arrives where he is not invited and acts as if he was expected. I felt my stomach tighten again. He has a talent for our theme. Saul nodded. "And a habit. He has been seen near the courthouse multiple times this month. He is working paper, immigration, identity, name changes, the same things Lila Hart was pulling." Wolf's voice was low. "He is attempting to alter the narrative before it reaches my hands," Saul said, "or to make sure it reaches you in a controlled form." I looked at Wolf. "So the man I tailed is Drake." Saul shook his head. "Not certain, but likely. Drake is tall. Drake has a scarred ear from an old knife fight in Europe. Drake is careful. Drake is not sentimental." Wolf went very still. His eyes were fixed on a point above my head, and I knew he was looking at something not in the room. It was the first time I had heard him say the name in full without refusing it. Saul watched Wolf. I watched Wolf. Fritz would have watched Wolf too, but Fritz has better sense than to enter an office thick with history unless asked. Wolf's voice remained calm. "Archie." "Yes, from this moment," Wolf said. "You will carry a gun." I blinked. Normally, Wolf does not approve of guns because they interrupt conversation and cause discomfort. When he orders me to carry one, it means he has stepped past irritation and into something colder. I tried for humor because humor is my instinctive form of armor. I already own one. Wolf's eyes narrowed. You will carry it on your person, not in a drawer, not in a pocket you forget. You will carry it as you carry your notebook. Saul leaned back, eyebrows lifting slightly. That's serious. Wolf's gaze stayed hard. Yes, I said. This is the part where you usually make a remark about my reckless tendencies. Wolf did not blink. This is not a moment for remarks. That landed harder than any joke could have. I nodded slowly. All right. Wolf's eyes stayed on mine. You observed a triangle of influence. Drake does not move directly. He moves through intermediaries. He controls access to information by controlling the hands that stamp it. Miss Hart attempted to place proof beyond his reach. She was eliminated. Now he tests my house, my schedule, and my people. Saul said, the orchid delivery was a probe. Yes, Wolf replied, and your locker corridor click was another, I said. And my tale confirms he is comfortable working daylight. Wolf nodded once. Predators are comfortable where they have already fed. Saul asked, what is he doing at the courthouse? Wolf's voice was calm. He is either burying a record or producing a counterfeit. The question is which record matters to him now. I frowned. Lila's birth certificate already ties her to Drake. That is not something he can easily erase. Saul's mouth tightened. Not erase, reframe, if he can cast her as unreliable, or illegitimate, or not his daughter on paper, then her evidence becomes gossip. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Precisely. I felt my pulse pick up. So he is trying to rewrite her identity after killing her. Wolf's voice stayed quiet. Yes, that is intimacy of a different kind. Saul stood. I will dig deeper into his courthouse contacts. Wolf nodded. Do so. Saul moved toward the hall, paused, and looked back at Wolf. You will eventually tell Archie what Belgrade was. Wolf's face did not change. Eventually, Saul left. I sat at my desk and took out my gun from the drawer, where it had been behaving like a guilty object. I checked it, loaded it, and slid it into my shoulder holster. The weight felt familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Like a tool you hope not to use, but cannot pretend you do not need. Wolf watched me without comment. Then he said, Archie, you will visit the courthouse tomorrow, not to prowl, to request the records Miss Hart requested, and to observe who attempts to hinder you. I nodded. And the print shop footage? Yes, Wolf said. And the third set of copies. She made 3 sets. One is unaccounted for. Find it. I looked up. Wolf. What? If Drake is working paper and testing the house, he wants something beyond attention, beyond revenge. Wolf's eyes narrowed. He wants control. I swallowed. Control of what? Wolf's voice was low, and there was iron in it. Control of my regret. He believes it belongs to him. I wanted to push then, but I did not. Wolf's eyes were too steady, and his tone had that final quality that means you are not getting more today. Outside, the city honked and rushed and pretended. Schedules are personal choices. Inside, the brownstone was learning a new rhythm, one that included a loaded gun on my shoulder and a predator moving paper through official hands. And I had the uncomfortable sense that the next test would not be delivered in an envelope. Chapter 7. A man who steals your schedule is annoying. A man who steals police property and then uses your desk drawer as a mailbox is personal. It began with a phone call from Inspector Kramer at 10 in the morning, which is the hour when I like to believe the world has settled into ordinary misbehavior. Goodwin, Kramer growled. You got any hobbies that involve breaking into police property? Only if you count visiting you, I said. Why? Because the victim's notebook, and one loose sheet logged with it, are missing, he snapped. I sat up straighter. Missing from where? From property, Kramer said, as if the word should be enough to stop my questions. It was logged, tagged, and stored. Now it's not there. That's a neat trick, I said. Stebbins misfile it. Kramer made a sound that was half disgust, half reluctant admission. Stebbins is a pest, but he can count. The notebook was there last night. It's gone this morning. You want me to solve police housekeeping, I said. I want you to keep your nose out. Kramer barked. And since you won't, I want you to tell me if that notebook turns up in your lab. I said, if it shows up in my lab, I'll charge it rent. Kramer hung up on me, which is his way of saying please. I walked into Wolf's office and delivered the news. Wolf's eyes narrowed. It was removed from police custody. Yes, I said. So either Kramer's office has a leak, or someone has hands long enough to reach through locked doors. Wolf's voice was dry. Police departments are built with leaks. It is their natural state. I sat down and tried to look casual, which was difficult because my mind was already drawing triangles. Scarred man to cop, cop to clerk, clerk to records. Now something to property room. Grease pencil lines crossing each other. You think Drake? I said. Wolf did not answer directly. I think the predator is not satisfied with intimidation. He is gathering. Gathering what? I asked. Wolf's gaze hardened. Knowledge. That was when Fritz appeared with coffee, the kind that could prop up a civilization. He placed Wolf's cup, nodded to me, and withdrew. Fritz is the only man I know who can move through danger without making it louder. I took a sip of my own coffee and decided I would not wait for the police to solve their own embarrassment. I went to my desk, opened the top drawer, and pulled out the file folder where I keep loose ends until they either become knots or disappear. The folder was untouched. My pencil was where I left it. My spare paper clips were lined up like obedient soldiers. Then I saw it. A small black notebook, the kind people buy at drugstores, lay flat at the bottom of the drawer as if it had always belonged there. My fingers stopped. I did not touch it immediately. There are moments when you do not want to confirm reality until you are sure you can survive it. I called out, Wolf. He came to the doorway of his office, big and controlled, and looked at me. What? He demanded. I pointed. He stepped closer, stared at the notebook, and his eyes narrowed until they were nearly slits. That is Miss Hart's notebook, Wolf said. Yes, I replied. It was missing from police property 10 minutes ago. Now it is in my desk drawer. I did not put it there. Wolf's voice was flat. So the predator has been inside our house again. Or he has friends inside the house, I said. Wolf's eyes flicked to me, then to the hall, then back. Do not indulge paranoia, indulge caution. I picked up the notebook with 2 fingers as if it might stain, carried it into Wolf's office, and placed it on his desk. Wolf did not touch it. He looked at it the way he had looked at the unmailed envelope, as if physical contact would grant it too much authority. I opened it. Most of the pages were filled with Lila Hart's neat handwriting, names, dates, addresses, short notes that looked like someone building a case with careful restraint. There were references to records offices, to the print shop, to the storage locker, to a phrase she had written twice and underlined, as if repetition could make it safer. Ask Wolf about the stairwell in Belgrade. Then I found the gap. A page had been torn out cleanly, not ripped in panic, torn with patience. Whoever did it had taken care to remove it without shredding the surrounding paper. That meant the page mattered. I looked at Wolf. The page is missing. Wolf's eyes were hard. The page that explains my regret. I'm guessing, I said. But if the predator went to the trouble of removing it from police property and planting it here, he wanted to make sure you knew he had it. Which means he wanted knowledge, not just quiet. Wolf's voice was low. Yes. I turned pages again slower. There were notes about immigration filings, name variations, a list of people she had contacted. One entry made my throat tighten. Midnight warehouse office. Near river, Edai. Read it aloud. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Midnight. Warehouse office, I said. Near the river. Wolf's voice stayed calm. And the initials. I said. Evan Drake. Wolf's face was granite, or someone using the initials. I stared at the notebook. She arranged a second meeting. Midnight. She never got there. Wolf nodded once. Therefore the meeting mattered. I flipped back and found a small map sketched in the margin, crude but readable. A street grid, a block marked with an X, and a note beside it, office upstairs, side entrance. I felt my mouth go dry. Side entrances and upstairs offices make good places for people who prefer quiet. He looked up. She planned to meet him and bring proof. Wolf's eyes stayed cold. She planned to confront him. Or negotiate, I said. Or beg, or threaten, or ask why he let her be used. Wolf's mouth tightened, and someone prevented it. By killing her, I said. Wolf's gaze did not soften. By controlling the sequence. I leaned back, trying to force humor into my voice, because the alternative was anger. So now the predator has the missing page, the one we would like to read, and he has had the courtesy to leave us the notebook, minus the part that matters. Wolf's voice was flat. Courtesy is not his motive. Display is, I said. He wants you to know he holds the page. Wolf nodded once. Yes, he is forcing me toward the past by holding a piece of it hostage. I pointed to the entry, and he is pointing toward the river. Wolf was silent for a moment. Then he said, "We will go." I blinked. "We will go where?" "To the warehouse office," Wolf said, as if he were announcing a meal. "Wolf," I said carefully, "you do not go to warehouses near rivers at midnight. You do not even go to restaurants near rivers at midnight, unless the menu is extraordinary." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "You are not amusing." "I'm not trying," I said. "I'm trying to keep you inside your natural habitat, which is this chair." Wolf's voice was calm, but it carried weight. "Archie, Miss Hart came to this house with knowledge. She was killed before she could complete her purpose. Her notebook indicates she arranged a second meeting with Evan Drake. If Drake is involved, this is the point of contact. If Drake is not involved, this is still the point of contact, because someone wants us to believe it is." Saul Panzer arrived then, as if summoned by the word contact. He stepped into the office, took one look at the notebook on the desk, and his eyebrows rose. "So it walked home," Saul said. "It was delivered," I replied. "Through the fine postal service of Menace." Saul's eyes sharpened. "Missing from property." "Yes." Saul exhaled once, controlled. "That confirms courthouse triangles. If he can pull evidence out of police custody, he has influence in blue uniforms." Wolf nodded. "Yes." I pointed to the entry. "Midnight. Warehouse office near river." Ed Saul's mouth tightened. "That looks like a trap. It looks like a meeting Lila planned," I said. "And now she is dead, and the meeting is still scheduled," Wolf said. "Which makes it an appointment with the predator." Saul looked at Wolf. "You are not going." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "I am going." Saul's voice turned sharper. "You do not leave the house for traps. You send Archie." Wolf's tone was flat. "If I send Archie alone, I allow the past to choose the present again. Miss Hart was chosen because she came to me. I will not permit another proxy to be broken on my behalf." I stared at him. "That is noble and insane." Wolf's eyes flicked to me. "It is necessary." Saul leaned forward. "Wolf, you are not built for warehouse stairs." Wolf's mouth tightened. "Do not discuss my build." Saul sighed. "I am discussing your survival." Wolf said, "Archie will carry a gun. Saul will accompany us. Inspector Kramer will not be informed. We will arrive early." I stared. "Arrive early." Wolf nodded. "Drake has a habit of arriving early to places he should not. We will adopt his habit." Saul looked at me. "This is going to be unpleasant." "It already is," I said. Wolf picked up the notebook, closed it, and set it aside with careful finality. Then he looked at me, and his eyes were steady in a way that left no room for argument. "Archie," Wolf said, "this is not a chase. It is prevention. The past has been attempting to enter my house through words and schedules. Tonight I will meet it at the door." I swallowed. "And if the door opens onto a stairwell," Wolf's gaze hardened, "then we will not go up blindly." Saul stood already moving mentally. "I will arrange an extra man. Wolf's eyes narrowed. No crowd. Saul's mouth tightened. One extra, invisible, practical. Wolf allowed it with a fractional nod, the kind that says he knows he is being sensible and resents it. The day dragged after that, slow and heavy, as if the city itself was aware midnight had been booked. Fritz served dinner early, then late. Then at a time that offended the clock, horsemen grumbled upstairs. The orchids were watered on an altered schedule that made them feel like conspirators. At 11:30, Saul and I stood in the front hall while Wolf came down the stairs. Coat on, hat set firmly, face composed. I looked at him and felt the oddest thing, a mix of irritation and respect. "You ready?" I asked. Wolf's voice was flat. "Number, I am committed." We stepped out into the winter night. The brownstone behind us lit warm and civilized, like it was pretending it did not know what we were doing. The cab pulled up. As we got in, my phone buzzed once more. Unknown number, one line, bring Wolf. Come alone. I looked at Wolf, and he looked back at me. He did not ask what it said. He did not need to. His eyes were already on the future, where the river waited, and the warehouse stairs waited, and a man named Evan Drake, or a man wearing his name, waited with the missing page that had never been meant to return. The cab door shut, and the brownstone, for the first time since I had known it, was left behind without Wolf inside to anchor its rhythm. Chapter 8. The river at midnight does not sound romantic. It sounds like a city exhaling through rotten pilings, and it smells like cold metal and old decisions. The warehouse district was lit in patches, bright where a security lamp worked, and black where it did not, and the streets around it had the hollow quiet that makes your footsteps feel like admissions. We arrived early because Wolf had decided that if someone was going to schedule his doom, he would at least insist on punctuality. The cab dropped us 2 blocks away. Wolf does not like walking, and I do not like Wolf walking in places where the only witnesses are rats and locked doors. But both of us dislike being seen more than we dislike discomfort. Saul moved ahead of us with the calm of a man who has walked into worse rooms and lived to invoice them. The building Lila had sketched in her notebook stood squat and unimpressive, the kind of place where legitimate goods and illegitimate favors get the same loading dock. The street was empty, but emptiness in New York is not peace. It is simply unclaimed space waiting to be used. Saul stopped under a broken street lamp and studied the FIA. "Office upstairs," he murmured. "Side entrance," Lila drew it right. I kept my voice low. "Any sign of life?" Saul's eyes narrowed. "No cars, no watchman. That is what worries me." Wolf's voice was flat. If Evan Drake wished a discreet meeting, he would have arranged exactly this. "A location that suggests secrecy and provides control," I said, "and provides excuses for gunfire." Wolf looked at me without humor. "Yes." We moved toward the side entrance. The door was metal with a narrow window reinforced by wire mesh. Saul tested the handle. It opened. Unlocked doors at midnight are like smiles on strangers. They are either invitations or traps, and both are dangerous. Saul glanced at Wolf. Wolf did not hesitate. He stepped forward with the calm of a man refusing to be impressed by a door. I stepped in first anyway, because I am the one with legs and street instincts, and the healthy belief that pride is not bulletproof. Inside, the corridor smelled of dust and oil. The air was cold. A single overhead light buzzed faintly, casting a sickly glow that made the concrete walls look damp, even when they were not. A narrow stairwell rose to the second floor, exactly as Lila's sketch had promised. Wolf paused at the bottom step and looked up with an expression that made me want to apologize to his knees. Saul whispered. "We go slow," Wolf replied, equally quiet. "We go correct." We climbed. My hand was inside my coat, on the grip of the gun Wolf had ordered me to carry without joking. Saul's hands were empty, which did not mean he was harmless. Saul can hurt you with his eyes if he has to. Halfway up, Wolf stopped. "Do you hear that?" he asked. I listened. There was the faint hum of electricity, like a building pretending it had life. There was also something else, a soft tick that did not belong. A timer. I felt my scalp tighten. I hear it. Saul's gaze hardened. Lights. The moment he said it, the overhead bulb at the bottom of the stairs flickered, then steadied, like a cue being tested. The building felt less like a warehouse and more like a stage. Wolf's voice was low. It is arranged. We reached the landing. At the top, a door stood slightly ajar, light spilling through the crack. The light was too clean, too bright. It looked like the kind of light used for offices where people sign documents and pretend the ink is innocent. Saul leaned close to the doorframe, listening. "Nothing," I whispered. "No voices. No footsteps." Wolf's eyes narrowed. Silence is also a voice. I wanted to tell him to stay behind me. Instead, I did the only thing that made sense. I moved first. I did not kick the door. That is for men who want headlines. I pressed it open a few inches more and looked in. The room beyond was an office, plain and staged. A desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, a cheap couch against one wall. The kind of room a man rents when he wants to look legitimate for a few hours. A single lamp on the desk burned brightly. The overhead lights were off. The lamp created a pool of light that fell on a spot of floor directly in front of the desk, like a mark on a stage. A mark where a man would naturally stand if he entered and faced the desk. A mark where Wolf would stand. I eased the door wider, keeping my body pressed against the frame. Saul stayed behind me. Wolf was 1 step back, still on the landing, his bulk held in check by his caution. Then I saw the second chair. It was set at an angle, slightly away from the desk, as if someone had risen from it quickly. On the floor near it lay a single glove, dark leather, as if it had been dropped in haste. Nothing else moved. And then the hum changed, and the soft tick stopped. The office light snapped on bright, harsh, timed. At the same instant, a sound cracked from the far side of the room, not loud like a cannon, sharp like a whip. A shot. The bullet smashed into the doorframe inches from where Wolf would have been if he had stepped through like a polite man arriving for a meeting. Plaster dust burst. Wood splintered. I did not think. Thinking is slow. I moved. I shoved the door wide with my shoulder and rolled into the room low, because low is where bullets have a harder time finding your heart. Saul lunged after me, fast and controlled. Wolf stayed on the landing, which was the smartest thing he had done all night, and I did not have time to admire it. A second shot cracked, aimed at the pool of light, aimed at the mark. The shooter was not in the room. The shots came from a narrow interior window cut into the far wall, covered by a slatted blind, the kind used in cheap offices to create the illusion of privacy. Behind that window was an adjacent space, dark positioned so that whoever stood in the mark would be an easy target framed by light. A man had designed it. A man had designed it for Wolf. Saul's voice snapped. "Window." I fired once at the blind, not because I expected to hit anyone, but because a bullet through a blind changes a shooter's confidence. The blind splintered. A shadow jerked back. Saul crossed the room in 3 steps and yanked open the door to the adjacent space. It was empty. The shooter had moved, and he had moved fast. I cursed under my breath and ran to the window. The adjacent space had another door, leading to a narrow corridor. At the end of the corridor was a stairwell, a back stairwell, and the door at its top was swinging gently, still settling from recent use. He was gone. I turned and saw Saul standing over the glove on the floor. He picked it up with 2 fingers, careful, not because he was delicate, but because he was professional. "Dropped," Saul said. "Not planted. Too careless for a plant." The glove carried a scent that did not belong in a dusty warehouse. Something clean, sharp, expensive, and stubborn. "Cologne," I said. Saul's mouth tightened. "Not cheap either." Wolf's voice came from the doorway. "Archie." I turned and saw Wolf standing on the landing, eyes cold, face composed, as if the bullets had been vulgar rather than lethal. "I am intact," Wolf said. "Are you?" "Yes," I said. Thanks to my charming habit of not obeying stage directions. Wolf's eyes narrowed. The lights were timed. Yes, I said. And the door was unlocked, and the shooter was positioned to hit the spot where you would stand. Wolf looked at the pool of light on the floor, then at the splintered door frame, then at me. It was designed. Saul held up the glove, and he left a souvenir. Wolf stepped into the room, at last, careful not to stand in the lit mark. He inspected the glove without touching it, then looked at Saul. You recognize that scent, Wolf said. Saul nodded. I have met men like him. They like to announce themselves without speaking. I said, that is not evidence that will impress Kramer. Saul's eyes stayed hard. This will. He turned the glove over, and I saw a snag in the leather near the ring finger, a small tear, not from age, but from catching on something sharp. Saul said, Drake wears a ring, not a wedding ring. A signet-style piece, large. It catches on fabric. I have seen him tug at gloves because the ring bites. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Vanity. Saul nodded. Small, stupid vanity, big, useful clue. I looked at the glove, then at Wolf. So we have scent and a snag. Wolf's voice was flat. We have performance. I blinked. Performance. Wolf's gaze hardened. This ambush was not merely to kill. It was to demonstrate control, the unlocked door, the timed lights, the mark on the floor, the shooter position for my height and posture. He is not merely informed. He is performing my life back at me. I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. Like a parody. Like possession, Wolf said. Saul moved to the desk and checked the drawers, fast, looking for something that would justify the staging beyond spectacle. He found nothing. The filing cabinet was empty. The couch cushions held only dust. Clean, Saul said. Too clean, I said. A trap room, rented for the night, staged and abandoned. Wolf nodded. Yes, and yet Miss Hart wrote it down as a meeting point. That means someone wanted her to come here, I said, and wanted us to come here. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Yes. Saul looked toward the back stairwell door. He escaped before we even entered the room. He fired, withdrew, and was already moving by the time Archie rolled in. Wolf's voice was calm. He timed the sequence. He anticipated the response. Archie spoiled it by being rude, I said. Rude is my finest trait. Wolf did not smile. He studied the room again, then spoke quietly, as if dictating a conclusion to himself. This was designed for my habits, Wolf said. Therefore the designer expects me to behave predictably. He believes he knows how I will enter a room, where I will stand, and how I will respond to provocation. I said, he wants you angry. Wolf's eyes were cold. He wants me obedient. Anger is simply one method. Saul held the glove out. We take this. Wolf nodded. Yes, bag it properly. We will not hand it to the police yet. Not until we know which pocket in their property room is already rented. Saul produced a small evidence envelope from his coat, because Saul is the sort of man who prepares for other people's messes. He sealed the glove inside with deliberate care. I walked to the doorframe where the first bullet had struck. The hole was clean. The shooter had not been sloppy. He had aimed at a human target and missed only because the human target had refused to stand where instructed. I said quietly, he wanted you dead, or he wanted you to know he could kill you. Wolf's voice was steady. He wanted both. We left the warehouse the way we entered, alert scanning shadows. The street outside was still empty, and the river still breathed cold behind the buildings. No footsteps followed, no car started, no figure moved under a street lamp. That was the worst part. A predator who flees noisily is a predator you can chase. A predator who disappears without a ripple is one who expects to be found on his own terms. Back in the cab, Wolf sat rigid, eyes forward, hands folded in his lap. He looked like a man enduring transportation, but I knew his mind was not in the cab. It was in that staged office, in the mark on the floor, in the timed lights. I broke the silence because I could not stand it. Wolf, this was not just murder. This was theater. Wolf's voice was low. Yes, you have to tell me what happened in Belgrade. Wolf's jaw tightened. He did not answer at once. Then he said, soon. Saul, sitting opposite, said quietly, if Drake is doing this, he is not acting alone. Men like that do not rely on one glove and one gun. Wolf nodded once. Number, he has a network. A triangle becomes a web when repeated. The cab rolled past the river and into the brighter parts of the city, where light makes people believe they are safer. I watched the streets, the pedestrians, the storefronts, the ordinary life moving past, and I felt the uncomfortable truth settle in. Someone had studied Wolf, not the detective in his office, but the man in his house, in his schedule, in his posture. Someone had taken that study and turned it into a performance designed to end with a body. We did not leave one, but we had seen the stage. And Wolf, who hates being manipulated more than he hates being threatened, was now facing a man who had decided to make Wolf's own life into a script and force him to read it aloud. Chapter 9. By morning, the brownstone felt like a house that had been handled by strangers, not rummaged, not ransacked, handled. Doors had become questions, corners had become possibilities. Even the familiar scent of coffee from Fritz's kitchen carried a faint note of suspicion, as if comfort had been borrowed. Wolf took breakfast late and ate it without pleasure. That alone would have been enough to tell me the case had reached inside him. Wolf can endure danger. He cannot endure disorder that has been engineered to mock him. He called me into the office at 9:30, which was not a time he usually calls anyone for anything. Saul Panzer was already there, sitting forward in the red leather chair with his hands clasped, looking like a man who had watched too many doors. Fritz came in, placed a tray with beer and a plate of biscuits, and left quietly, as if the room contained a kind of heat he did not want to feed. Wolf did not touch the beer. Archie, he said, sit. I sat. Saul's eyes flicked to me, then to Wolf. We were all waiting for Wolf to do what he does best, which is to take the messy pieces other people throw and arrange them until they form a single shape. Wolf began without preamble. Miss Hart, he said, was not merely a visitor. She was connected to Evan Drake by blood, as evidenced by the certificate we obtained. I nodded. His daughter, which means she had more than curiosity, she had a reason. She also had leverage, Wolf said. An inheritance claim. Saul lifted his eyebrows. You found that? Wolf's gaze went to Saul. You found it. Saul's mouth tightened. A probate clerk owed me a favor. Evan Drake's earlier assets were parked under a trust, and the trust has a clause. A late recognition of paternity triggers a review. Miss Hart's documents could have forced it. I leaned back. So, she was not only asking why Drake haunted you. She was threatening Drake with money. Wolf nodded once. Yes, but money alone does not explain the performance. No, I said. The performance was for you. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Correct. Drake attempted to place me in the role of culprit, not victim, Saul said. The notebook. Wolf's voice stayed calm. The notebook was removed from police property, then delivered to our house. A page was removed. That page is the one which explains the matter of Belgrade, the stairwell, and the regret the predator wishes to weaponize. I watched Wolf's face carefully. He had kept that door closed with the stubbornness of a man protecting a locked room. Now he was calling it what it was, a locked room. And the police property theft, I said, means Drake has reached into uniforms. Wolf nodded. Yes. Saul's voice was dry. Reach and confidence. Wolf's gaze sharpened. Confidence can be induced. That is what we will do now. I waited. Saul waited. Wolf leaned back in his chair, and when he did, it was not relaxation. It was placement, like a chess player settling after seeing the board. We have 4 pieces, Wolf said. First, Miss Hart's claim and her proof. Second, the missing notebook page. Third, the theft and return of property. Fourth, the staged ambush, which demonstrates knowledge of my behavior and assumptions about my reactions. The common element is control of schedule and information. I said, so we break his control. Wolf nodded. Yes. We will set a trap using the one thing no outsider should predict. Saul's eyes narrowed. What? Wolf's gaze flicked upward for a moment toward the ceiling, toward the orchid room that had been closed by someone else once already. My schedule, Wolf said. Specifically, my orchid schedule. I stared at him. You are going to move Orchid Hour again. I am going to announce I will, Wolf corrected. And I will announce it in the one channel a predator who buys uniforms can hear quickly. Saul leaned forward. You will leak it to the police. Wolf's mouth tightened slightly. I will allow the police to overhear it. I felt my eyebrows rise. That is a distinction that only you would insist on. It is accurate, Wolf replied. Inspector Kramer is convinced I am withholding. That makes him eager to catch me in something he will listen, Saul said. And Drake will listen through him. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Not through Kramer. Kramer is too loud to be purchased. Through someone near him. Someone who handles what the police handle. Evidence, notes, property. I thought of the courthouse clerk and the grease triangle in the diner, and my stomach tightened. Wolf stood, moved to the window, and stared down at the street as if he could see the predator's shadow on the sidewalk. We will do this in my office, Wolf said. Today, we will invite Inspector Kramer and the relevant parties. Saul's mouth tightened. That is public. It will be controlled, Wolf said. The predator prefers controlled environments. We will show him one he does not own. I said. Who do we invite besides Kramer? Wolf turned. The courthouse clerk. Saul's eyebrows lifted. You have a name. I have a candidate, Wolf said. Archie will make it a certainty. That was my cue. Wolf does not ask, he assigns. I went back to the courthouse with my hat pulled low and my mind running through faces. The clerk I had watched take the folded message was there again, seated behind his window like a man trying not to think. He looked up when I approached and immediately decided he did not like me. I used my best harmless smile. Morning, I need to request a file, he said. Fill out the form. I already did, I replied, and slid a form across the counter that looked official enough to satisfy his reflexes. He took it, glanced at it, and frowned. This is not a real docket number, he said. Right, I said. I wanted to see if you would correct it. His eyes flicked up sharply, then down again. I don't correct. I stamp. That's funny, I said. Because yesterday you corrected something nobody asked you about. His face tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. I'm talking about the folded message you took from a cop and slid into records. His hands froze. The pencil in his fingers stopped moving. I said gently, I'm not the police. I'm the man who notices, and I notice you are sweating in a room that is overheated on purpose. He stared at me for a beat, then looked away. Get out of line. I'll get out of line, I said. But first you're going to accept an invitation. He scoffed. From who? Nero Wolfe, I said. His face went pale enough that I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I can't, he whispered. You can, I said, or you can explain to Inspector Kramer how a victim's notebook went missing from police property, and why it came back with a page torn out. Wolf can make it sound like a confession, even if you only clear your throat. His jaw worked. I didn't tear anything out. I didn't say you did, I said, but you know who paid for the notes. His eyes flicked up at that, quick and guilty. That was enough. I had my certainty. Back at the brownstone, Wolf had already arranged the room the way he likes it, chairs set like a jury, his desk as the bench. Fritz had served lunch with tight dignity. Horstman stayed upstairs, offended by the shifting schedule, and offended by the reason for it, which meant he was offended properly. Inspector Kramer arrived at 2, grumbling before he even entered the office. He brought Stebbins, who carried a notebook, and the expression of a man eager to be punished by facts. Kramer looked at Wolf. "All right, what is this? You call me over like I'm your errand boy." Wolf's tone was mild. "You are here because you are impatient. Impatience is useful." Kramer's face darkened. "Watch it." Wolf did not watch it. He never does. Then the courthouse clerk arrived, escorted by Saul, pale and stiff, eyes darting like a rabbit that has wandered into a kitchen. Kramer stared. "Who the hell is that?" Wolf said. "A man who has been allowing your department to be embarrassed." Kramer's jaw tightened. What Stebbins looked delighted, which is one of his worst qualities. Wolf sat, folded his hands, and began his trap. "Inspector," Wolf said, "you believe I am the reason Miss Hart died." Kramer snorted. "She came to you and wound up dead." "That's a pattern," Wolf nodded. "Yes, a pattern arranged to implicate me. The predator removed her notebook from your custody, then returned it to my desk drawer. That act has one purpose. It demonstrates he can penetrate both your procedures and my home, then suggests my home is the source of her death." Kramer leaned forward. "You got proof of that?" Wolf's eyes flicked to Stebbins. "Ask him where the notebook was logged." Stebbins blinked, then flipped pages. "Property, sir. Logged, tagged, shelf B." Wolf said, "And now it was found in my desk. Explain that." Kramer's face tightened. "We're investigating." Wolf nodded. "You are being used now. We proceed." He lifted his chin slightly, and I knew the next part was bait. "This morning," Wolf said, "I altered my orchid schedule. Horseman upstairs would have fainted if he had heard it described that way." Kramer barked a laugh. "What do I care?" Wolf's tone stayed mild. "You should care because only the people in this house know my precise orchid schedule. Yet last night a man attempted a timed ambush designed for my posture and habit that indicates knowledge. Today I announced, within earshot of your department, that my orchid hour would be changed again. It was announced in this office while Stebbins was present." Stebbins blinked. "I was." Wolf nodded. "Yes, and within 30 minutes, a man arrived outside my house too early." Kramer frowned. "What man?" Wolf looked at Saul. Saul stepped to the side, went into the hall and returned a moment later. Evan Drake walked in under Saul's watchful eye, as if he had been expected, clean suit, clean hands, scarred ear hidden by his angle, but not hidden enough. His eyes were calm, his mouth politely set, and he carried himself like a man who believes rooms are rented by his presence. He smiled at Wolf. "Nero." Wolf's eyes were cold. "Mr. Drake." Kramer half rose. "Who is this?" Drake glanced at Kramer with mild surprise. "Inspector, I did not expect you." Wolf's voice stayed calm. "That is interesting because no one asked you about expectations." Drake's smile tightened slightly. Wolf continued, "You arrived too soon. You corrected a detail no one requested you correct. That is how we know your channel is not rumor. It is inside." Kramer's face darkened. "Channel." The courthouse clerk made a small sound like a man swallowing glass. Wolf's eyes turned to the clerk. "Tell Inspector Kramer who paid you." The clerk shook his head quickly. I didn't do anything." Wolf's voice was flat. "You accepted money to obtain Miss Hart's notes and to facilitate the narrative that I caused her death." The clerk's eyes darted to Drake, then away. Drake's voice stayed smooth. "This is absurd." Wolf did not look at him. He looked at the clerk. "You will speak now because if you do not, Inspector Kramer will speak to you later, and his voice is less civilized than mine." Kramer snarled. "You bet it is." The clerk's shoulders sagged. His lips trembled. "Drake," he whispered. "He paid me." Kramer's face went red. "Paid you for what?" The clerk's voice cracked. "To get the notes, to get her notebook pages copied, to make sure the police report showed Wolf was the last place she went, like he was the reason, like she died because she came to him. Kramer stared at Drake, then at Wolf, then back. You paid to make Wolf look guilty. Drake's smile thinned. Inspector, I am a consultant. I pay for information. That is not a crime. Wolf's eyes were cold. Murder is a crime. Drake's gaze flicked to Wolf. You accuse me of murder. Wolf's voice was calm. I accuse you of orchestration. I watched Drake's face. The smoothness held, but the eyes sharpened. He was calculating. He had not expected the office to contain his own reflection so clearly. Wolf continued. Miss Hart came to me seeking truth. She possessed proof regarding your identity and your relationship to me. You arranged to retrieve her notes, retrieve the missing page, and retrieve your control. Then you attempted to kill me in a staged performance built on my habits. Drake's smile returned faintly. Prove it. Wolf's gaze flicked to Saul. Saul produced the sealed evidence envelope and held it up. A glove, Saul said. Dropped at the warehouse. Leather snag consistent with a large ring. Cologne consistent with Drake's. Kramer's eyes narrowed. I want that. Wolf's voice was flat. Not yet. Kramer started to protest, then stopped, because he could see Drake in the room, and Drake in the room was more important than a glove in an envelope. Wolf leaned back, eyes on Drake. You came too soon. That is the flaw in your choreography. You are used to controlling the schedule from outside. Today, I altered it, and you revealed you had access to the announcement immediately. That is how we locate your channel. Drake's expression did not change, but a muscle in his jaw tightened. Wolf's voice grew slightly sharper. Now, Inspector, you will have your crime, not in the form you expected with a body and a weapon, but in the form of influence purchased and used to frame a man and to silence a woman. Kramer's hands clenched. Stebbins, Malloy, get this man. Drake did not move. He only smiled, as if handcuffs were an inconvenience he could negotiate. Wolf watched him with icy calm. You are not negotiating, Mr. Drake. You are finally being treated like an ordinary man. Drake's eyes flicked once to the office door, to Saul, to me. He was measuring exits, as predators do. Wolf's voice was quiet. Sit down. The final page of your performance has not been read. Chapter 10. Wolf's office has hosted every kind of human performance, from tearful confession to arrogant denial. But there is one performance Wolf prefers above all others. The quiet one. The one where a man walks in confident, sits down because he has been told to, and then discovers the room has already decided what he is. Evan Drake stood near the door with that clean suit and that calm face, and for the first time since I had laid eyes on him, his calm looked slightly strained, as if it were being worn rather than inhabited. Inspector Kramer was half out of his chair, Stebbins was quivering with excitement, and the courthouse clerk looked like a man who would have paid twice his bribe back to become invisible. Wolf did not raise his voice. He rarely needs to. He simply waited until the room's noise stopped, and then he spoke. Mr. Drake, Wolf said, you will sit. Drake's smile flickered. I do not take orders in other men's houses. Wolf's gaze was cold. That is unfortunate because you have been taking them from mine for days. Sit. Drake hesitated a fraction, then sat in the chair facing Wolf's desk. It was a small surrender, and it mattered. A predator forced to occupy a seat becomes a defendant. Kramer's voice was sharp. Wolf, I've got enough to haul him in right now. You have enough to begin, Wolf said. If you begin now, you will end wrong. Sit down, Inspector. Kramer's face reddened, but he sat. He knows Wolf well enough to recognize when the big man has placed a hook and is waiting to set it. Wolf looked at the courthouse clerk. You will remain, you will also listen. You have been paid to pass paper. Now you will learn what paper does when it tells the truth. The clerk swallowed and nodded. Wolf's eyes moved across the room, settling briefly on me. I knew that look. It was not affection. It was acknowledgement. Wolf was about to open the locked room, and he was letting me know I would be inside when it happened. He turned back to Drake. You have been using the word regret as a lever, Wolf said. It is time it becomes a fact. Drake's smile was careful. You mean you will entertain the room with a story? Wolf's voice stayed calm. Number, I will end your attempt at extortion. You killed Miss Hart to prevent proof of her parentage. You also killed her to control me. Both motives are evident in your actions, Kramer snapped. Hold it. You're saying he killed her. Wolf's eyes shifted to Kramer. I am saying he arranged her death. The method is less important than the intent. The killer moved through my house's rhythms, removed property from police custody, staged an ambush, and used paper to shape narrative. That is not the work of a casual criminal. You still have no proof I killed anyone. Wolf nodded once. We will proceed to proof. He reached into his desk drawer and removed the black notebook. He placed it on the blotter, opened it to the torn gap, and let the room stare at absence. This page was removed, Wolf said. It contained the explanation you sought, and the leverage you wished to hold. You removed it after acquiring the notebook through bribery. You believed that by possessing it, you possessed me. Drake's mouth tightened slightly. You have no idea what I possess. Wolf's eyes narrowed. I have a very clear idea. You possess a memory you wish to weaponize. The stairwell in Belgrade. The clerk flinched at the word, like a man hearing a gunshot in a church. Wolf continued, voice steady. Years ago in Belgrade, I made a decision that was not consistent with my usual exactness. I spared a man when I should have ended him. Silence settled. Even Kramer stopped breathing loudly. I felt my throat tighten because I had never heard Wolf speak of mercy as if it were a mistake. Wolf is not cruel, but mercy is not his favorite word either. Wolf looked at Drake. That man was you. Drake's eyes did not change, but something behind them did. It was a faint sharpening, like a blade being tested against a thumb. Wolf's voice stayed calm. You were useful at the time, close enough to be trusted, clever enough to be valuable, and reckless enough to be dangerous. In a stairwell in Belgrade, you betrayed an arrangement. People died because of your betrayal. You would have died as well, and the world would have been improved by your absence. Kramer's eyes widened. Belgrade. What the hell were you doing in Belgrade? Wolf did not look at him. Living a life I no longer live, Inspector. Drake spoke softly. You always did enjoy the sound of your own judgment. Wolf's eyes narrowed. I judged correctly. I acted incorrectly. I spared you. I allowed you to leave that stairwell with your breath intact. Drake's smile returned, thin. And now you regret it. Wolf nodded once. Yes, that is my regret. Not because I mourn the act of mercy in principle, but because the object of it was you. I sat very still, because hearing Wolf admit regret is like hearing the house admit it has a crack. It changes how you stand. Wolf continued. You have spent years cultivating your usefulness into a trade. Consultant, broker, purchaser of favors. You have also spent years nursing the belief that my one deviation from exactness is a debt you may collect. Drake's voice was mild. A debt is a debt. Wolf's gaze was icy. Not when it is invented by a predator. Kramer barked. All right, story time is over. Where's the proof? Wolf's eyes shifted to Saul. Saul. Saul stood and placed a thin folder on Wolf's desk. Chain of custody, Saul said. Police property logs. The notebook moved, logged out at an hour when no proper request existed. The signature is not an officer's signature. It is a clerk's hand copied badly. Stebbins leaned forward, eyes glittering. Inspector, that's our property record. Kramer's face darkened. You got that from where? Saul's mouth twitched. From a friend who dislikes being made a fool. Wolf tapped the folder gently. This establishes the theft. It also establishes influence. Now we establish motive and method. He looked at the courthouse clerk. You were paid to obtain Miss Hart's notes, Wolf said. You were also paid to see that my name appeared as the last destination in the narrative, so that her death would cling to me, correct? The clerk's shoulders sagged. Yes. Wolf's eyes narrowed. And you were paid by whom? The clerk glanced at Drake, then at Kramer, then down at his own hands. By Drake. Drake's smile remained. He is lying to save himself. Wolf's voice stayed calm. He is speaking because the room has changed. He now sees you as you are. Wolf turned back to Drake. Now, Mr. Drake, we address Miss Hart. Drake's expression tightened slightly. Miss Hart, Wolf said, came for answers. She had discovered her parentage. She possessed documentation that would prove she was your daughter. That proof threatened your assets and your carefully maintained narrative. It also threatened your leverage over me because a daughter is not easily dismissed as a stranger. Drake's voice was smooth. You claim she threatened my assets. That is speculative. Wolf nodded once. Then let us be specific. The trust clause Saul discovered would have required review upon recognition of paternity. Miss Hart's documents, combined with her birth certificate, could have forced that review. She arranged copies and backups because she anticipated you would attempt to erase her. The third set was mailed, per HR instruction, to a lawyer whose number we found in her tin arriving this morning. Drake's eyes flicked once, a small tell. Wolf saw it. And she arranged a meeting with you at midnight, Wolf added. At the warehouse office near the river. She likely intended to confront you with proof, and perhaps to force you to acknowledge her publicly. Drake's mouth tightened. She was unstable. Wolf's gaze hardened. She was cautious. That is why she made 3 sets of copies. That is why she paid 3 months on a locker under a false name. That is why she wrote a letter to me and did not mail it. She wanted control of timing. You took it from her. Kramer leaned forward. How? Wolf's voice stayed steady. She was killed cleanly, no struggle, lightly sedated, then suffocated. A method that does not create noise, does not create witnesses, and does not require a weapon that can be traced. A method used by a man who prefers control. Drake's smile thinned. You are making a speech. Wolf nodded once. Yes. And now we conclude it with the missing page. I felt my pulse jump. Wolf had said the page was missing. He had also said Drake possessed it. Now he was implying it was no longer possessed. Wolf looked at Saul again. Saul reached into his coat and removed a folded sheet of paper inside a protective sleeve. Drake's posture shifted, subtle, like a man tightening muscles. Saul held it up, recovered from a safe in Drake's office. Not his official office, the one he rents when he wants to look legitimate. Kramer half rose. You broke into a safe. Saul's eyes stayed steady. I obtained access. There is a difference. Wolf spoke calmly. Inspector, if you wish to argue procedure, do so after you have handcuffed the correct man. Kramer's jaw worked. He sat again, eyes locked on the sleeve. Wolf said, That page was torn from Miss Hart's notebook. It contains her summary. It also contains the line Mr. Drake wanted most. Wolf held out his hand. Saul placed the sleeve on the desk. Wolf did not open it yet. He looked at Drake first. You killed Miss Hart, Wolf said, to stop her from proving her parentage and to extort me with the story of Belgrade, the stairwell, and my mistake. Drake's smile was gone now. His eyes were cold. You cannot prove I killed her. Wolf's voice was flat. I can prove you orchestrated her death and attempted to frame me. I can prove you stole evidence from police custody. I can prove you attempted to murder me at a staged ambush. I can also prove you possessed the missing page, which you acquired through bribery and which you kept in your safe as your leverage. He finally opened the sleeve and removed the page. He looked at it once, then read slowly so the room could not escape the words. The page was Lila Hart's hand, neat and controlled, not frantic. It summarized her discoveries. Drake's identity variations, his connections, the trust clause, and the reason she went to Wolf. Then it stated, plainly, the thing Drake had wanted to hold over Wolf. He spared him in Belgrade, the stairwell. Wolf regrets it. Drake knows it. Drake said he would make Wolf pay for mercy. Wolf set the page down. For a moment, even Kramer was silent. There are some truths that make even police stop talking. A truth about a man like Wolf. Especially, Drake spoke quietly. You still have no witness. Wolf's eyes narrowed. We have the clerk's confession, the chain of custody record, and the page from your safe. We have the glove from the warehouse, and we have your premature arrival today. Correcting details. No one asked. We have your reach into uniforms. You have built your own cage. Kramer stood abruptly, chair scraping. That's enough, Drake. You're coming with us. Drake's eyes flicked to me. To Saul, to the door. He did not bolt. Men like Drake do not bolt unless the room has already become fire. He said, smooth again. Inspector, you will regret arresting me. Kramer stepped closer. Save it. Malloy. And another officer moved in. Drake did not fight. He allowed the cuffs as if they were temporary inconveniences. As they led him out, he turned his head slightly toward Wolf. You should have finished it in that stairwell, Drake said softly. Wolf's face did not change. His voice was quiet. Yes, that was all. The room slowly exhaled after Drake was gone. The courthouse clerk was shaking. Stebbins looked like he might float. Saul sat back satisfied, but not relaxed, because men like Drake have shadows. Kramer lingered at the doorway, face tight. He looked at Wolf, and for once, he did not have a growl ready. Wolf, Kramer said finally, why didn't you tell me any of this earlier? Wolf's eyes were calm. Because you would have listened poorly, Kramer snorted. Maybe, but you could have saved her. Wolf's gaze hardened, and his voice dropped a fraction. I intended to. That was why I went to the warehouse. Kramer held Wolf's eyes for a long beat, then looked away. We'll see what the district attorney says about all this paper and influence. You did good, Wolf. He left, and the brownstone's air began, cautiously, to become private again. Fritz entered quietly, carrying a tray. He placed it on Wolf's side table with the dignity of a man restoring order. A beer for Wolf, coffee for me. Something sweet, because Fritz believes sweetness belongs in a house even after ugliness has visited. Wolf took his beer, lifted it, and drank. The act was simple. The meaning was not. It was Wolf reclaiming a ritual that had been used against him. I sat back and looked at the torn notebook, the recovered page, and the photo of Wolf beside Drake, younger and harder, a past version of himself that I had never met. Lila, I said quietly. She came for answers and got killed for it. Wolf's eyes narrowed. She also came to give warning. She did not fail entirely. She got her name back, I said, thinking of the birth certificate and the proof now in police hands. At least the world will know she was not just a dead woman in an alley. Wolf nodded once. Yes. I stared at him. Wolf, your past is not romance, not legend. It's one spared monster. Wolf's face stayed composed, but his voice softened by a fraction. It is one error, paid for in blood, I said. Wolf's eyes held mine. Yes. Fritz moved quietly in the doorway, listening without listening, the way a good man does when he knows what he hears is private. The house settled around us, the old rhythms resuming, but altered forever by the knowledge that a schedule can be weaponized and a regret can be rented by a predator. I picked up my coffee and took a sip. It tasted like New York, which is to say strong enough to keep you upright, even when you would prefer to sit down and pretend nothing ever happened. Upstairs I heard Horstman moving about, tending orchids, as if flowers could repair the world's logic. Maybe they can, a little. Wolf looked at the papers on his desk, then at the doorway Drake had walked through, and then he said, with the calm of a man finally closing a door he should have closed years ago, Archie, tomorrow we return to our proper schedule. I nodded, but as I stood to leave the office, my hand brushed the weight under my coat. The gun Wolf had told me to carry without joking, and I knew there were some habits you do not fully unlearn. Not after you have seen a man try to perform your life back at you, not after you have learned what a single spared monster can cost.